In the shadow of the Great Pyramids, where the scent of desert sand mingles with the echoes of ancient life, there existed a world of healing, shrouded in mystery. The ancient Egyptians, a civilization that pushed the boundaries of art, architecture, and spiritual understanding, also found themselves confronting the fragility of human health. But in this land, where the sun worshipped the gods and the Nile whispered its eternal flow, medicine was no simple science. It was an intricate dance between the natural and the supernatural. At the heart of early Egyptian healing was a belief in balance. Illness was seen not merely as a physical ailment, but as a disruption in the harmony of the body, the spirit, and the divine forces that governed the world. It was an era when disease was as much an act of the gods as it was the result of an imbalance in the body's internal systems. The Egyptians, ever in tune with the spiritual world, believed that the gods could send sickness as punishment or as a sign, an indication that something had gone awry in the divine order. To the Egyptians, every illness had a cause, yet the cause was not always something that could be easily seen with the eye. A simple cough or fever could be interpreted as the result of divine wrath or a restless spirit. And thus, healing was not just a matter of applying a remedy, it was a spiritual pursuit, as much as it was a physical one. Priests, those revered intermediaries between the gods and the people, would often double as healers, wielding their knowledge of both magic and medicine in tandem. They did not just treat the body, they appeased the gods, performing rituals and reciting incantations to restore balance to the afflicted. In the dimly lit chambers of Egyptian temples, where incense burned thick in the air, a physician's role was intertwined with that of a priest. Amulets, enchanted with protective symbols and spells, were as common as the herbs that filled their apothecaries. Remedies were crafted not only from nature plants, minerals, and animal parts, but also from the powerful forces of magic, believed to carry divine healing energy. Aloe vera for burns, frankincense for respiratory ailments, and myrrh for pain relief were just a few of the natural substances that filled their early pharmacopoeia. Yet, these remedies alone were not enough. A healing ritual was often necessary, one that could channel the powers of gods like Isis or Thoth, invoking their divine mercy to ease suffering. But was it truly medicine, or was it the gods who were doing the healing? The ancient Egyptians did not separate the physical from the spiritual in their understanding of health. They knew that to heal the body, one first had to address the spirit, and so priests performed sacred rites to restore equilibrium, while physicians worked to mend the body. To the Egyptians, it was impossible to distinguish between the two. It's fascinating to think of a time when healing was not just a matter of science, but a blend of faith and ritual. Was it the herbs and rituals that cured, or was it the faith in the gods that brought about the true healing? As the ancient Egyptians perfected these methods, they built a framework that would evolve over centuries. But this framework was not built on knowledge alone, it was shaped by beliefs that bridged the realms of the divine and the earthly. And so, the dawn of Egyptian medicine, steeped in mystery and magic, began. In the ancient land of Egypt, where towering temples touched the sky and the Nile carved through the heart of civilization, healing was not a mere profession, it was a sacred duty. Medicine, intertwined with religion, was a divine responsibility, entrusted to those who stood at the crossroads of the physical and spiritual realms. Physicians in Egypt were not simply practitioners of medicine, they were revered as powerful intermediaries between the gods and the people, holding a unique place within the social and religious fabric of Egyptian society. At the core of this sacred practice was the concept of the priest-physician. Unlike the modern divide between religion and medicine, ancient Egyptian healers were both doctors and priests, their roles and responsibilities deeply rooted in the spiritual world. Healing was not just about treating illness, it was about restoring harmony, appeasing deities, and invoking divine intervention. Those who were trained in the healing arts were often seen as blessed by the gods themselves. Their sacred duty was to heal not only the body but the soul, making them central figures in both the health and spiritual well-being of the community. The Egyptian medical hierarchy was complex and multifaceted, with physicians holding various ranks depending on their skills and status. At the top of the pyramid were the royal physicians, those who served the pharaohs and the elite. These esteemed healers had access to the best resources, the most sacred knowledge, and, perhaps most importantly, the direct favor of the gods. They were often called upon to treat not just physical ailments but to conduct healing rituals that could influence the fate of the kingdom itself. These royal doctors were expected to be learned in the most advanced treatments, from intricate surgeries to the magical rites that ensured the pharaoh's health. Below them were the physicians who treated the common people, doctors who worked in the villages, in the bustling marketplaces, or within the walls of the temples. Though they did not enjoy the same elite status as royal physicians, they were still highly respected. These healers were skilled in both physical diagnosis and treatment, using herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and, of course, powerful amulets and spells. They were often trained in medical schools established within the temples, where the knowledge of healing was passed down through generations, combining both scientific knowledge and religious rites. What set these priest-physicians apart from modern doctors was their dual role. They were healers and spiritual guides. Their understanding of medicine was not solely based on physical symptoms. They were trained to read the signs that were often seen as messages from the gods. Illness was not just a physical affliction, it was an imbalance, a disturbance in the natural order, often caused by angered deities or disruptive spirits. And so, a physician's role was to heal the body while also appeasing the gods, using both practical and spiritual methods. It was a delicate balance, one that gave these healers great power and influence within society. These medical practitioners were often regarded as divine figures themselves, their abilities to heal seen as a direct manifestation of the god's will. But beneath the sacred responsibility lay a strict hierarchy, where the knowledge of the priest-physicians was passed down only to the most worthy, the most spiritually in tune, and those who could stand in the presence of gods and kings alike. As we turn to the next chapter, we'll explore the medical texts that helped codify these practices, documenting the treatments and spells that defined Egyptian medicine and providing us with a glimpse into how they intertwined the sacred and the scientific. Imagine for a moment, standing in a sun-drenched room, surrounded by the scent of ink and papyrus. In your hands, you hold an ancient manuscript, its edges frayed with age but its words still legible, its wisdom still intact. This is no ordinary scroll. It is a medical document, crafted by the hands of priests and physicians who lived thousands of years ago. Yet it holds secrets that have only recently been fully understood. These ancient texts, specifically the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus, offer us a glimpse into the medical practices of the ancient Egyptians, revealing a civilization whose knowledge of the human body, disease, and healing was far more advanced than we often assume. The Ebers Papyrus, often regarded as one of the oldest and most significant medical texts to survive from ancient Egypt, is a comprehensive guide to diseases, remedies, and spells. Stretching over 20 meters in length, this scroll is a treasure trove of medical knowledge. But what truly sets it apart is the way it intertwines the practical with the mystical. At its core, the Ebers Papyrus serves as both a medical handbook and a magical guide. The Egyptians didn't simply treat disease with herbs and remedies, they believed that illness could be caused by supernatural forces, and so their healing methods were just as much about appeasing the gods as they were about applying physical treatments. Within this remarkable text, we find a wide range of ailments and their corresponding treatments. It covers everything from minor issues, like eye infections and digestive disorders, to more serious conditions such as fevers and wounds. The Ebers Papyrus details not only the use of herbs, oils, and minerals, but also the incantations and rituals that were believed to enhance the healing process. For instance, it describes the use of aloe vera for skin treatments and the application of frankincense to treat infections, remedies that we still use today. But it also reveals a belief in the supernatural, as the ancient Egyptians saw healing as a delicate balance between the physical and the spiritual. In their eyes, curing an ailment was not just a matter of administering a remedy. It required the intervention of divine forces, accessed through prayers and rituals. Yet, despite the mystical components of the Ebers Papyrus, its scientific insights are staggering. The text contains over 700 diagnoses and treatments, offering an early glimpse into the medical practices that would later shape Western medicine. It reveals how the Egyptians identified diseases based on symptoms, recognized patterns in the spread of illness, and even understood the importance of hygiene in preventing infections. For example, they used a variety of antiseptic substances to treat wounds, not unlike the ways we do today. These treatments, when viewed through the lens of modern science, show how ahead of their time the Egyptians truly were. But while the Ebers Papyrus offers a broad spectrum of medical knowledge, it is the Edwin Smith Papyrus that reveals just how sophisticated Egyptian surgical practices were. Unlike the Ebers Papyrus, which is more focused on general health and mystical treatments, the Edwin Smith Papyrus is a much more practical document, primarily concerned with trauma, injuries, and surgical procedures. The text is named after Edwin Smith, the American Egyptologist who discovered the scroll in the 19th century, and it's considered the oldest known surgical treatise in existence. What makes the Edwin Smith Papyrus so remarkable is its focus on surgical techniques, many of which were shockingly advanced for the time. The papyrus describes over 40 cases of trauma, detailing how physicians performed surgeries on broken bones, head injuries, and dislocations. It even includes methods for treating spinal injuries, offering evidence that ancient Egyptians understood the concept of nerve damage and paralysis. The surgical procedures described in the Edwin Smith Papyrus reveal a surprising knowledge of anatomy, with the text noting the positions of bones, muscles, and even the brain. In fact, it's been suggested that some of the surgical instruments mentioned in the papyrus resemble tools used in modern-day operations. Scalpels, forceps, and surgical saws were all part of the Egyptian physician's toolkit, reflecting a level of precision and understanding that seems almost inconceivable for an ancient civilization. One of the most astonishing aspects of the Edwin Smith Papyrus is its approach to diagnosis. The text emphasizes the importance of observation. Physicians were trained to assess symptoms carefully and follow a logical process to determine the best course of action. The cases described in the papyrus are not vague. They are detailed and specific, providing a glimpse into the thought process of ancient Egyptian surgeons. There is a certain clinical quality to the papyrus that sets it apart from other medical texts of the time, offering evidence that Egyptian physicians were not only healers but also scientific observers who understood the body in ways that many of their contemporaries did not. But perhaps the most striking feature of both the Ebers and Edwin Smith Papyrus is how they challenge our perception of ancient Egypt as a mystic civilization with limited knowledge of the physical world. These texts reveal a society that, while deeply rooted in religious belief and ritual, also had a profound understanding of the human body, illness, and healing. The Egyptians blended the physical and the supernatural, merging practical treatments with divine intervention, creating a system of medicine that was not only effective but also deeply spiritual. As we consider these texts, it's impossible not to be struck by their sophistication. Ancient Egyptians didn't just treat their patients, they understood them, observing and documenting the human condition in ways that would influence the medical world for centuries to come. The Ebers and Edwin Smith Papyrus are not mere relics of the past. They are windows into the brilliance of an ancient civilization that, in many ways, was ahead of its time. In the next chapter, we'll delve deeper into the herbal remedies and natural treatments used by the ancient Egyptians. As we explore the world of medicinal plants, we'll uncover how the Egyptians balanced the physical with the spiritual, using plants not just to heal, but to invoke divine favor. The intersection of nature and mysticism in Egyptian medicine reveals an understanding of healing that was both scientific and profoundly spiritual, offering us valuable lessons in how ancient civilizations approached the mysteries of life and death. In the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where the sun blazed down relentlessly and the Nile River carved its way through the desert, there existed a hidden world of healing. This world was not constructed in grand temples or palaces, but found in the quiet, nurturing embrace of the earth. The Egyptians, with their deep reverence for the natural world, turned to the very plants, herbs, and minerals around them to treat the ailments of the body and soul. Long before the development of modern pharmaceuticals, they had already discovered the power that lay within nature's offerings. The Egyptians were among the earliest civilizations to cultivate medicinal gardens, and their knowledge of plants was vast and unparalleled. In these gardens, lush with life, the seeds of healing were sown, and the roots of remedies took hold. From the humble aloe vera to the sacred frankincense, Egyptian healers carefully selected, prepared, and applied nature's gifts to treat everything from minor discomforts to life-threatening conditions. Aloe vera, for instance, was a cornerstone of Egyptian medicine. It wasn't just a remedy for burns, though it excelled in that role. It was used to treat a myriad of skin diseases, ease digestive troubles, and even as an agent to soothe internal wounds. The gel from its leaves was applied directly to burns or abrasions, working its magic to reduce inflammation and speed the healing process. What might seem like a simple plant today was, to the Egyptians, a precious gift from the earth, one that held the power to protect and restore the body. Then there was frankincense, whose aromatic resin was believed to be as sacred as it was medicinal. Known for its anti-inflammatory properties, frankincense was used in a variety of ways. It was burned as incense in temples, believed to purify the air and invite divine presence, but it also found its way into healing practices. Used as an oil or resin, frankincense was thought to ease pain and soothe respiratory issues, making it invaluable for treating ailments that affected the lungs, such as asthma or coughs. The very act of inhaling its smoke was seen as a way to invite spiritual healing, while the resin itself worked wonders on the physical body. These plants and many others were not just remedies, they were part of a larger system of belief. The ancient Egyptians understood that the power of nature could be harnessed not only through the application of the plant itself, but also through rituals and incantations that amplified its effectiveness. Herbs, oils, and resins were infused with magic. The belief was that a spell or prayer could unlock the plant's deepest healing properties. Healing, for the Egyptians, was as much about belief as it was about physical treatment. The mind and spirit needed to be aligned with nature for the remedies to take full effect. In the Egyptian worldview, healing was a sacred act, one that required balance between the natural world and the divine. The plants were seen as earthly gifts from the gods' tools through which the divine could work its will on the human body. Each plant, mineral, and herb carried a vibration that resonated with the forces of the universe, and when used with the proper intention and reverence, it could restore harmony to the body, mind, and spirit. The power of nature was not just a medical strategy, it was a belief system, a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical. The Egyptians knew that nature's remedies were not merely a matter of chemistry, but of aligning oneself with the very forces that shaped the world around them. As we move deeper into Egyptian healing practices, we'll explore the profound connection between magic and medicine. In the next section, we'll see how these natural remedies were not just applied to the body, but were intertwined with rituals and spells that amplified their power. The line between the physical and the spiritual was never clear-cut in ancient Egypt, and understanding this balance is key to unlocking the secrets of their healing practices. In the land of the ancient Egyptians, where the river Nile flowed like the blood of the earth, the boundary between the physical and the spiritual was never clear. Medicine was not a simple matter of diagnosing and treating physical ailments. It was a vast, complex practice that blended the realms of the material and the mystical. Ancient Egyptian healers did not view illness purely as a disease of the body. They understood it as a sign of spiritual imbalance or divine displeasure. For them, healing was as much about restoring harmony with the gods as it was about tending to the body. And at the heart of this practice was magic, an invisible yet powerful force that infused every aspect of their medical care. Magic was not some fringe aspect of Egyptian healing, it was integral to it. In fact, many of the healing practices we associate with Egyptian medicine today were deeply intertwined with spells, rituals, and charms. When an Egyptian healer treated a patient, the physical remedy was often accompanied by incantations, prayers, and the use of magical amulets. These elements worked in concert to restore balance and bring about a cure, reflecting the Egyptians' belief that the body's health was inextricably linked to the unseen spiritual world. For the ancient Egyptians, illness was often seen as a result of spiritual disarray, an imbalance between the body and the gods, or a manifestation of anger from the divine. Gods like Sekhmet, the lioness-headed goddess of healing, were believed to be able to either cure or inflict disease. When disease struck, it was not just the body that was at fault, but the soul and the divine order. A person's affliction might be caused by spirits, curses, or the anger of a god, and healing could only occur when that spiritual imbalance was corrected. One of the most remarkable aspects of Egyptian healing was their understanding of the power of words. Incantations, spoken with the right tone and intention, were believed to hold transformative powers. The Egyptians saw words as more than just sounds. They believed that the act of speaking had the power to influence reality, particularly in the realm of health. Healers would recite spells to call upon the gods, to banish evil spirits, or to restore harmony to the sick person's soul. These spells often invoked deities known for their healing powers, like Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic, or Isis, the goddess of healing and protection. Amulets and charms played a crucial role in the treatment of ailments as well. Egyptian doctors would often place protective amulets on patients, believing that these items, charged with divine energy, could shield the wearer from harm. One of the most common amulets was the Time's Eye of Horus asterisk, an ancient symbol of protection and good health. This symbol was believed to ward off evil and to restore balance in the body, making it a powerful tool in healing. Other amulets were crafted specifically for particular ailments, such as headaches, eye infections, or abdominal pain. These charms were thought to have both spiritual and physical power, and their effectiveness was tied to the belief that the gods themselves were working through these objects to heal. But it wasn't only the words spoken or the amulets worn that played a role in Egyptian healing. There were also powerful rituals, some of which have survived in the texts of ancient Egypt. One such ritual was the healing of the heart, which was an important part of Egyptian medical practice. In this ceremony, the healer would focus on the heart, considered the seat of life and emotion in Egyptian belief, and attempt to remove the blockages or disturbances that were thought to cause illness. The ritual would often involve chanting, prayers, and the use of incense, all designed to cleanse the heart and restore balance. The heart, in this sense, was not just a physical organ, it was a center of spiritual power, and any ailment related to it was seen as a deep spiritual disturbance that needed to be addressed with the help of magic. Another fascinating ritual in Egyptian healing was the ritual of the snake, which was designed to heal both physical and spiritual wounds. The snake, in Egyptian symbolism, represented transformation, protection, and renewal. Snakes were often associated with the god Atum, who was believed to have created the world by speaking words of power. During the ritual, the healer would use the symbolism of the snake to guide the patient through a process of spiritual renewal, invoking the regenerative powers of the serpent. In some cases, live snakes were even used in rituals to treat physical injuries, as the Egyptians believed that the snake's venom had healing properties if used correctly. These rituals were not mere superstition. To the ancient Egyptians, they were vital parts of the healing process. The belief that magic could heal the body was as real as the belief that plants and herbs could treat disease. The Egyptians saw their world as a constant interplay of physical and spiritual forces, and illness was viewed as the result of an imbalance between these forces. The healer's role was to restore balance, and magic was a necessary tool in this restoration. What's most intriguing about this blend of magic and medicine is that it's not confined to the realm of ancient Egypt. In fact, many of these practices and beliefs about the healing power of words and rituals can still be found in modern spiritual and holistic healing practices today. The Egyptians understood that healing wasn't just a matter of treating symptoms, it was about restoring harmony, whether that meant balancing the body, the soul, or the relationship with the divine. But despite the powerful role that magic played in Egyptian medicine, it wasn't the only tool in the healer's arsenal. Herbs, minerals, and natural remedies were still used as essential parts of the healing process. as we saw in the previous section. However, the integration of these natural remedies with rituals and incantations set Egyptian healing apart from other early civilizations. It was this holistic approach that made their medical practices so effective and so deeply embedded in their culture. As we transition to the next section, we will uncover another intriguing aspect of Egyptian healing, the nighttime rituals, when it was believed that the healing power of magic was at its most potent. During the stillness of the night, when the forces of the spiritual world were thought to be closest, ancient Egyptian healers would perform their most sacred and powerful rituals. The next section will explore how the quiet, mystical hours of the night were used to amplify the healing powers of both medicine and magic, continuing the blend of belief and practice that defined Egyptian medical traditions. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert and the golden city of Thebes, another world began to awaken, a world where the veil between the physical and spiritual realms was at its thinnest. In ancient Egyptian culture, the night was not just a time for rest, but a sacred moment imbued with profound significance. It was believed that during the dark hours, the gods were closest to the earth, and the forces of magic were at their most potent. Healing, too, took on a different nature as the world quieted and the stars flickered above. The night, in the Egyptian worldview, was a time for deep, mystical restoration, a moment when healing rituals could reach their fullest power. The Egyptians believed that the night was not just a time for sleep, but a time for the spirit to wander, to commune with the gods, and to find solace and balance. In this quiet, meditative atmosphere, rituals were performed with the utmost care and reverence. These nocturnal healing rituals were seen as a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. It was during the night, under the cover of darkness, that many of the most sacred and effective healing practices took place. One of the most significant of these rituals was the anointing of patients with sacred oils. Under the moonlight, healers would carefully apply these oils, often infused with herbs, resins, and the blessings of gods, onto the skin of the sick. These oils were not merely medicinal, they were believed to carry divine energy, a gift from the gods themselves. The oils, applied with slow, deliberate motions, would not only treat the body, but were thought to ease the spirit, aligning it with the cosmic forces that governed health and balance. The soothing act of being anointed by the light of the moon was seen as a way to invite divine healing into the body, restoring harmony both physically and spiritually. At the same time, prayer ceremonies would unfold in the temples, hushed whispers of incantations filling the air. These prayers, recited in the stillness of the night, called upon the gods for healing, protection, and guidance. It was believed that during the night, when the world was at rest, the gods were more likely to hear and respond to the prayers of the sick. These ceremonies were not just acts of faith, they were seen as an essential part of the healing process. The ritualistic chanting of names, the invocation of divine protection, and the offering of symbolic gestures were all meant to bring the sick closer to the realm of the gods, allowing for divine intervention in their recovery. But it wasn't just the rituals that made the night such a powerful time for healing, it was the very stillness of the night itself. The Egyptians understood the importance of peace and quiet for the healing process, and during the dark hours, there was little to disturb the meditative atmosphere that enveloped the patient. It was in this serenity that the spiritual world could more easily align with the physical, where a sense of deep restoration could take place. The mind and spirit were given space to heal, and the healing energies of the gods could flow freely into the body. As the moonlight bathed the sacred temples and homes of the healing priests, the lines between the physical and spiritual world blurred. It was a time when belief, ritual, and nature combined to create a perfect environment for recovery, one that transcended the simple application of medicinal remedies. For the ancient Egyptians, healing was not just a physical act but a spiritual one, and the night was seen as the time when this sacred healing could reach its peak. In the next section, we will move into the darker, more enigmatic side of Egyptian medicine. While the night was a time of healing, it was also a time when the Egyptians believed that forces beyond their control could strike. We will explore the practices surrounding curses, hexes, and death, revealing how Egyptians used magic not just for restoration, but for protection and control over the unseen forces that shaped their world. Deep within the ancient tombs of Egypt, where the air was thick with the weight of history and mystery, there lay a darker aspect of healing, an unseen force that could heal or harm with a single word. The ancient Egyptians believed in the power of curses and hexes, and to them, these supernatural forces were as real as any plant or potion in the healer's arsenal. Curses weren't merely words spoken in anger. They were thought to possess an incredible power that could inflict suffering, disease, and even death. But curses weren't just used as tools of revenge. They were also deeply connected to the Egyptians' belief in spiritual protection, especially when it came to the royal tombs of the pharaohs. The Egyptians believed that the gods, and even the dead, could influence the living. The tombs of pharaohs, sacred burial sites where the rulers' souls were meant to rest for eternity, were seen as places of unimaginable power. To disturb these tombs, to violate the sanctity of the burial grounds, was to invite the wrath of the gods. It wasn't merely a matter of theft or disrespect. It was a spiritual offense that could lead to disastrous consequences. For this reason, the tombs of pharaohs were often surrounded by curses, meant to protect the sacred spaces from invaders and tomb robbers. But the curses also served as a form of divine punishment, a way of ensuring that the living paid for their transgressions. The most famous of these curses is the Curse of the Pharaohs, a legend that has persisted through the centuries, especially in connection with the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. Archaeologist Howard Carter and his team were met with a series of mysterious and tragic deaths after opening the tomb, leading many to believe that they had fallen victim to the curse. The belief was that those who disturbed the pharaoh's final resting place would be struck down by the gods, their bodies afflicted with disease, misfortune, or even death. Although modern science has debunked many of the more sensational aspects of the curse, the idea that a tomb could hold such power over the living captured the imagination of people around the world. But the Curse of the Pharaohs was not simply a punishment for tomb robbers. It was also a reflection of the Egyptians' understanding of power, death, and control. Curses were seen as powerful tools that could be wielded by those who understood the secrets of the divine. Priests, healers, and even pharaohs themselves were believed to have the ability to cast curses on others, using words, rituals, and magic to manipulate the forces of life and death. A curse could be used to destroy an enemy, to punish a wrongdoer, or to protect oneself from harm. It could cause disease, deformity, and even madness, as it was believed that the very essence of life could be disrupted by the right incantation or magical act. In Egyptian society, power was often linked to the ability to control these supernatural forces. The pharaoh, as both a god and a ruler, was seen as the ultimate authority, capable of commanding the forces of nature, life, and death. Those who opposed the pharaoh, or who violated sacred spaces, risked incurring the wrath of the gods, and the curse was seen as a way to restore order and balance to the world. But for all their power, curses were not always a one-way force. Healers and priests who understood the magic of curses also knew how to undo them. They performed rituals and invoked deities to lift the curse, restoring health and balance. The Egyptians understood that curses were not just an expression of anger or punishment, they were a means of controlling the unseen forces that governed their world. As we move from this dark aspect of Egyptian medicine, we will turn our attention to the ways the Egyptians sought to protect themselves from these forces. Through the use of spells, amulets, and rituals, they sought to ward off curses, hexes, and other dangers that lurked in the spiritual realm. In the next section, we will explore how these protective measures became an integral part of Egyptian medicine, blending the magical and the medical in ways that we still find fascinating today. In ancient Egypt, where the line between the physical and the spiritual was constantly blurred, the belief in protection was as strong as the belief in curses. While dark forces like disease, evil spirits, and the wrath of the gods could wreak havoc on the living, the Egyptians knew that there were powerful tools, both physical and spiritual, that could shield them from these dangers. Amulets and spells were not just decorative or symbolic, they were integral parts of daily life, believed to hold real, tangible power over the unseen forces that shaped existence. The use of amulets was ubiquitous in ancient Egyptian culture, and they were worn by nearly everyone: pharaohs, priests, commoners, and even children. These small objects, often made of stone, wood, or metal, were engraved with symbols and inscriptions designed to protect the wearer from harm, heal ailments, and invoke the favor of the gods. The Egyptians believed that these amulets were infused with the divine energy of the gods, making them potent talismans of protection. Among the most famous and revered of these amulets was the Time's Eye of Horus asterisk. The Eye of Horus, often depicted as a stylized human eye with markings, symbolized protection, healing, and restoration. It was linked to the god Horus, the sky god associated with kingship and protection. According to Egyptian mythology, Horus lost his eye during a battle with his uncle Set, but the eye was later restored by the god Thoth. This act of healing became a symbol of restoration and safety, and the amulet was often worn to protect the wearer from evil forces, especially during illness or danger. It was believed that the Eye of Horus could ward off harmful spirits and bring good health, serving as a protective charm against curses and misfortune. Another widely used amulet was the scarab, a symbol of rebirth, transformation, and protection. The scarab beetle was associated with Khepri, the god of the morning sun, who was often depicted with a scarab head. The Egyptians believed that Khepri rolled the sun across the sky, much like a beetle rolling a ball of dung, symbolizing the daily cycle of death and rebirth. Scarab amulets were commonly worn to protect the wearer from evil and to ensure a successful journey into the afterlife. They were placed in tombs, often over the heart of the deceased, to help guide the soul through the dangerous journey to the afterlife, ensuring that it would not be harmed by malevolent forces. The Ankh, another key symbol in Egyptian culture, represented life and immortality. Its looped shape, resembling a key, symbolized the opening to eternal life. The Ankh was not just a symbol of the afterlife, but also of protection. It was often worn as an amulet to safeguard the wearer from illness and death, with the belief that it could bestow longevity and shield the person from harm. Egyptian priests and healers would often wear the Ankh as it symbolized their connection to the divine and their role as protectors of life. These amulets were often inscribed with prayers or spells, designed to enhance their protective qualities. The inscriptions invoked the power of gods like Isis, Thoth, or Osiris, calling upon them to safeguard the wearer. In addition to wearing amulets, ancient Egyptians would perform rituals both public and private to activate the protective powers of these talismans. Priests would lead ceremonies to invoke divine protection, using the right words and actions to ensure that the gods would watch over the people, expelling evil spirits and preventing curses from taking hold. The significance of these protective rituals reveals how deeply intertwined medicine was with spirituality in ancient Egypt. For Egyptians, healing was not merely a matter of treating the body, it was about aligning oneself with the divine, seeking the favor of the gods, and ensuring that the forces of good remained in control. Whether through the physical application of herbs, the wearing of powerful amulets, or the performance of sacred rituals, every act of healing was a step toward restoring balance and harmony between the physical world and the spiritual realm. As we move forward, we will explore how these protective practices were also deeply connected to death and the afterlife. For the Egyptians, the line between life and death was often a thin one, and the same magical forces that could heal the living were also used to safeguard the soul in the afterlife. In the next section, we will uncover how death, magic, and medicine came together in rituals designed to protect the deceased and ensure their safe passage into eternity. In ancient Egypt, death was not seen as an end, but as a continuation of the cycle of life, a passage into a new realm, where the soul would embark on its most important journey. The ancient Egyptians viewed death and the afterlife through a unique lens, one that blended spiritual healing with the rituals of burial and protection. For them, the process of dying was as much about preserving the body and soul as it was about ensuring that the journey to the afterlife was smooth, safe, and free from harm. Healing, it seemed, did not stop with the cessation of life. It simply transitioned into another form, where magic and medicine were crucial in safeguarding the dead. For the pharaohs and the elite of Egypt, death was a carefully orchestrated process, and mummification became one of the most sacred practices of all. The bodies of the deceased, especially those of the ruling class, were preserved with incredible skill and care to ensure that the physical form would remain intact for the journey ahead. This process wasn't just about preserving the corpse, it was a form of spiritual healing designed to ensure that the soul could safely pass into the afterlife, where it would face trials, challenges, and divine judgment. The Egyptians believed that the body needed to be preserved in its most perfect state, as the soul would need it to be recognized in the afterlife. To this end, the process of embalming was undertaken with reverence, using oils, resins, and bandages to preserve the body for eternity. The embalming process itself was viewed as a spiritual and medical act, one that required knowledge not only of anatomy, but also of divine rituals. The body was washed, anointed, and treated with protective substances, while internal organs were removed and carefully stored in canopic jars to safeguard them for the journey ahead. But the process of mummification wasn't just about physical preservation, it was about spiritual protection. The Egyptians believed that without proper preservation, the soul could not continue its journey and would be left to wander, vulnerable to malevolent forces. The healing of the body, therefore, was a key component in ensuring that the soul would not suffer during its journey through the afterlife. But embalming and mummification were only part of the larger picture. As important as the preservation of the body was the protection of the soul itself, which was believed to be vulnerable to various dangers as it navigated the realms beyond life. This is where the Times Book of the Dead Times came in, a vital collection of spells, prayers, and rituals designed to guide the soul through the challenges it would face on its journey. The Times Book of the Dead Times functioned as a manual for the deceased, helping them avoid dangers and pass through the trials of the afterlife. Its contents included prayers to the gods, instructions on how to overcome obstacles in the underworld, and spells that would allow the soul to pass safely through gates guarded by fearsome deities. The book was not simply a collection of random spells, it was a roadmap, carefully crafted to ensure the soul's survival. It contained invocations to gods such as Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and Anubis, the god of mummification and the protector of tombs. These prayers and spells were meant to provide the soul with the necessary divine protection, allowing it to navigate the trials it would face, including the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, a test that determined whether the soul was worthy of entering the afterlife. The Times Book of the Dead Times was inscribed on the walls of tombs, on papyrus scrolls, and even placed directly in the tombs of the deceased, ensuring that the soul had access to the guidance it needed. The role of curses in this process cannot be overlooked, either. Death and the afterlife were not just seen as a passage to eternal peace, they were also fraught with dangers. Curses could be placed on the deceased, not only to prevent their peaceful journey to the afterlife, but to punish those who violated sacred tombs or disturbed the resting places of the dead. These curses were believed to have the power to cause illness, misfortune, or even death to those who trespassed. And once a curse was cast, it was believed to be incredibly difficult to undo. The restless spirits of those whose burial rites had not been properly observed could rise from their tombs, causing harm to the living. The Egyptians believed that a well-performed burial ritual and the proper magical protections were essential for ensuring that the soul did not become a vengeful spirit, returning to wreak havoc on the world of the living. In many ways, the fear of these curses was just as strong as the desire for protection. The dead, it seemed, had the power to influence the living, and if their passage to the afterlife was not properly guided and protected, they could bring about disaster. This belief in the power of the dead to affect the living was an essential part of Egyptian culture, reinforcing the idea that death was not just an end, but a continuation of the healing process. As we move from the complex rituals surrounding death and the afterlife, we turn our attention to the role of royal physicians in Egyptian society. While the preservation of the body and soul was paramount, the health of the living was just as critical, especially for the ruling class. In the next section, we will explore the specialized medical practices employed by the royal physicians, examining how these practitioners balanced both the physical and the spiritual needs of the elite, ensuring their health, vitality, and protection from the unseen forces that govern their lives and deaths. When we think of ancient Egypt, our minds are often drawn to towering pyramids, intricate mummification rituals, and mystical gods. However, one of the most surprising aspects of this ancient civilization lies in their approach to surgery, a practice that, despite its spiritual and mystical overtones, was far more advanced than one might expect. Ancient Egyptian physicians, while steeped in religious beliefs, displayed remarkable sophistication in their understanding of the human body and the art of surgery. From delicate eye surgeries to the treatment of fractures, their medical knowledge laid the groundwork for much of what we know today about surgical practices. Evidence of this advanced surgical knowledge can be found in the archaeological remains of surgical instruments discovered in Egyptian tombs. These tools, scalpels, forceps, and saws reveal that Egyptian surgeons had a practical understanding of how to operate on the human body with precision. Among these instruments, the scalpels are particularly noteworthy. Similar in form to modern surgical knives, they were crafted with razor-sharp edges, allowing physicians to perform delicate incisions during procedures. Forceps, designed for grasping and manipulating tissues, were used in a variety of treatments, including those for childbirth and the removal of foreign objects. These tools show that Egyptian surgeons were not just practicing rudimentary techniques, they were employing tools specifically designed for their craft, indicating a high degree of sophistication. Perhaps one of the most astounding aspects of ancient Egyptian surgery is the evidence of brain surgeries, specifically trepanation, a procedure that involves removing part of the skull to treat head injuries or brain conditions. Trepanation is one of the oldest known surgical procedures, and its practice in ancient Egypt reveals a surprisingly advanced understanding of anatomy and the brain. Archaeological findings suggest that Egyptian physicians were performing these surgeries with a surprising degree of skill, sometimes even allowing patients to survive the procedure. Evidence of healed skulls with holes cut into them points to the Egyptians' knowledge of bone structure and their ability to treat traumatic injuries to the head. What is particularly remarkable is that these procedures were performed with a level of care that suggests the Egyptians understood the risks involved, using tools that were not only precise but effective for the task at hand. Beyond brain surgery, Egyptian physicians were also experts in bone setting and fracture treatment. Broken limbs and dislocated joints were common injuries, and the Egyptians had developed methods to treat them. They would use splints and bandages to immobilize broken bones, ensuring proper healing. In some cases, they even performed surgical interventions to set bones or to address complications from fractures. These techniques, which might seem basic by modern standards, were advanced for their time and laid the foundation for many orthopedic practices used today. Eye surgery is another area where the Egyptians exhibited remarkable expertise. They performed procedures to treat cataracts and other eye conditions, using both surgical techniques and medicinal remedies. The Egyptians recognized the importance of vision and, as a result, had developed a series of treatments to address eye ailments. Instruments similar to modern-day probes were used to treat conditions such as pterygium, growths on the eye, while other remedies involved the use of medicinal plants and oils to soothe eye infections and reduce inflammation. Despite the sophistication of these procedures, ancient Egyptian surgery was not without its limitations. Their understanding of human anatomy, while impressive for its time, was still far from complete. The spiritual beliefs that permeated Egyptian medicine also shaped their approach to surgery. Rituals and prayers often accompanied physical treatments, blending the art of healing with divine intervention. However, the fact that they could perform surgeries with the tools and knowledge they possessed, while also embracing the magical aspects of healing, is a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of ancient Egyptian physicians. As we move from the impressive surgical techniques of ancient Egypt, we will now turn our attention to the limitations and risks of these practices. While Egyptian surgery was groundbreaking, it was still bound by the cultural and scientific understanding of the time. In the next section, we'll explore how their medical knowledge, though advanced in many respects, was still hindered by a lack of advanced diagnostic tools and a limited understanding of anatomy and internal medicine. The blending of mysticism with practical medicine also meant that not all treatments were as effective as others, leaving room for both miraculous recoveries and unfortunate failures. While the ancient Egyptians exhibited extraordinary skill and ingenuity in their surgical practices, their knowledge was far from perfect. The techniques they employed, though advanced for their time, were constrained by the limitations of their understanding of the human body and the tools at their disposal. Their surgical prowess, particularly in procedures such as trepanation and bone setting, was remarkable, but it also carried significant risks, some of which could not be avoided due to the lack of advanced medical knowledge and technology. One of the most notable areas of limitation was the Egyptians' understanding of internal anatomy. They had a reasonably good grasp of the external structures of the body, bones, muscles, and skin, but their knowledge of the internal organs and their functions was rudimentary. Although the ancient Egyptians had a deep reverence for the human body and performed detailed embalming procedures that involved the careful removal and preservation of internal organs, their knowledge of the intricacies of these organs was still quite basic. They did not understand the circulatory system, the inner workings of the heart, or the role of internal organs in the broader function of the body. This lack of internal anatomical knowledge inevitably constrained their ability to perform more advanced surgeries or diagnose conditions that affected the body's internal systems. Despite this, Egyptian surgeons performed some of the most challenging surgical procedures of their time. The most famous of these is trepanation, removing part of the skull to treat head injuries or certain neurological conditions. Although this procedure was remarkable in its own right, it was not without its risks. For one, the lack of sterilization methods meant that infections were a constant threat. Even the smallest incision could become infected, leading to complications that would often prove fatal. The tools used for these surgeries, though sharp and specialized, were not sophisticated enough to prevent such risks. While some patients may have survived the procedure, many would have succumbed to infections or complications caused by the lack of proper aftercare. In addition to these practical limitations, Egyptian surgery was deeply intertwined with the belief systems that governed every aspect of their lives. For the Egyptians, healing was not just a physical process, it was a spiritual act, one that required divine intervention. As a result, many surgical procedures were accompanied by rituals and incantations, which were believed to enhance the efficacy of the physical treatment. Physicians were not just healers, they were also spiritual guides, invoking the power of the gods to aid in the recovery process. This fusion of physical and spiritual healing was characteristic of Egyptian medicine and was thought to provide the necessary balance to ensure success. However, this blending of magic and medicine also meant that surgery was sometimes more about ritual than it was about the practicalities of treatment. A procedure could be performed to remove a tumor, for example, but the patient might also undergo an elaborate series of prayers, offerings, and spells to invoke the god's favor. While the physical procedure might have been effective, the belief that divine power was also at work could cloud the actual effectiveness of the treatment, leading to a mixture of successes and failures. The risk involved in these surgeries was compounded by the lack of effective anesthesia or pain management. Surgeries, particularly the more invasive procedures like trepanation, would have been excruciatingly painful. While the Egyptians were skilled in applying soothing oils and salves, there was little they could do to numb the pain of a major surgical intervention. This meant that patients undergoing surgery faced not only the physical risks of the procedure itself, but also the trauma of intense pain during and after the operation. Despite these challenges, the Egyptians were incredibly resourceful, often using their understanding of anatomy and natural remedies to treat wounds, fractures, and injuries with a degree of success. However, the limitations of their surgical practices remind us that while they were far ahead of many other ancient civilizations in terms of medical knowledge, they were still bound by the scientific and spiritual understanding of their time. Now that we've explored both the advancements and limitations of Egyptian surgery, we move into a fascinating realm, the practice of medical diagnosis. While Egyptian surgery had its limitations, the Egyptians were highly skilled in observing and diagnosing disease, often relying on a mixture of physical examination and spiritual insight. In the next section, we will explore how ancient Egyptians identified and classified diseases, and how their diagnostic practices laid the groundwork for the future of medicine. In the shadow of the towering pyramids and the flow of the Nile, where sand and time have preserved both knowledge and mystery, ancient Egyptian physicians honed the delicate art of diagnosing diseases. Long before the age of modern technology, without the convenience of X-rays, blood tests, or advanced imaging, Egyptian doctors relied on keen observation, intuition, and even spiritual insight to decipher the ailments of their patients. Despite lacking the diagnostic tools we take for granted today, the ancient Egyptians were able to identify and treat a wide range of diseases with a degree of accuracy that still surprises us. From tuberculosis to parasitic infections, and even some forms of cancer, Egyptian healers demonstrated an impressive ability to recognize patterns and symptoms that many might have thought beyond the reach of ancient medical practitioners. The key to their diagnostic success lay in their acute sense of observation. Egyptian physicians were masters of reading the signs of the body, paying close attention to physical symptoms that many modern doctors might overlook. They understood that the human body was a complex system, where changes in one part of the body could reflect problems elsewhere. It wasn't just about treating the symptoms, it was about observing the body as a whole and recognizing patterns of illness that could reveal the true nature of a condition. Physical examinations, though rudimentary by today's standards, were central to the Egyptian diagnostic process. Healers would often begin by inspecting the body, taking note of visible changes in skin color, texture, or swelling. This kind of careful observation allowed them to identify various skin diseases, infections, and conditions such as leprosy or psoriasis. They also paid attention to the pulse, a key diagnostic tool used to assess heart function, circulation, and the overall health of the body. By feeling the pulse, Egyptian physicians could determine whether a patient had a fever or signs of internal distress, even if they didn't fully understand the underlying cause. The Egyptians also had an early understanding of how diseases manifested through physical symptoms, a knowledge that helped them diagnose illnesses like tuberculosis and parasitic infections. Tuberculosis, for instance, often manifests with a persistent cough and blood in the sputum symptoms that would have been recognizable to a trained Egyptian physician. Parasitic infections, such as bilharzia, which was spread by contaminated water, would have shown clear signs in the skin and digestive system, making it a diagnosable condition. While the Egyptians didn't know the exact bacteria or parasites responsible, they were adept at identifying the physical manifestations of these diseases and treating them with herbal remedies and rituals. What set Egyptian diagnosis apart from modern medicine, however, was the integration of spirituality into their medical practices. Disease wasn't just seen as a physical issue, it was often believed to be a manifestation of spiritual imbalance or divine punishment. The Egyptians saw illness as a signal that the body, or the soul, had fallen out of alignment with the divine order. If a person was suffering, it wasn't merely because of an infection or injury, it could be a sign that the gods were displeased or that evil spirits had taken hold of the body. Therefore, diagnosis was as much about interpreting spiritual and divine messages as it was about observing physical symptoms. For the ancient Egyptians, disease could be a curse, a punishment for sins or moral failings. A person with an unexplained illness might be thought to have angered a god or incurred the wrath of a spirit. Priests, who often served as medical practitioners, played an important role in diagnosing spiritual causes of disease. Alongside physical examination, Egyptian healers would often perform rituals to identify the true cause of an ailment. This could involve praying to the gods, casting spells, or using amulets to protect the patient from harmful forces. The belief that disease could be a spiritual affliction meant that the cure was not simply about addressing physical symptoms, but about restoring balance to the soul as well. In some cases, diseases were attributed to the actions of evil spirits or the influence of malevolent gods. In these instances, diagnosis could include the identification of the specific spirit believed to be responsible for the affliction. Once the source of the disease was identified, whether a curse, spirit, or imbalance with the gods, the healer would perform specific rituals to ward off the evil forces. These rituals were often complex and could involve chanting, sacrifices, or even the use of symbolic objects like amulets or figurines to ward off the negative influence. Healing, therefore, was not just a matter of addressing the body, but of restoring spiritual harmony. One of the most remarkable aspects of Egyptian diagnostic practices was their ability to combine spiritual and physical observations. A doctor might notice that a patient had a high fever and pale skin, indicating a possible infection, but they would also consider whether the person had recently committed a sin or had angered the gods. This holistic approach, seeing disease as both a physical and spiritual imbalance, was a defining characteristic of Egyptian medicine. While their methods lacked the technology we rely on today, the ancient Egyptians' diagnostic practices were sophisticated in their own right. They were able to treat many diseases with herbal remedies and surgical techniques based on an acute understanding of human anatomy and disease symptoms. The combination of careful observation and spiritual insight allowed Egyptian physicians to provide a level of care that was remarkably effective for its time. What's more, these ancient practices laid the groundwork for future generations of healers, influencing medical systems for centuries to come. As we shift from the diagnostic methods employed by the ancient Egyptians, we'll now turn our attention to their treatments. In the next section, we will explore how Egyptian physicians used a combination of physical remedies and magical practices to address the diseases they identified. Whether through herbal treatments, surgical procedures, or rituals invoking divine protection, Egyptian medicine was a blend of science and mysticism, a practice rooted in both the body and the spirit. In the dimly lit chambers of Egyptian temples and the bustling market streets of Thebes, ancient physicians would face their patients not with modern diagnostic tools like X-rays or blood tests, but with something far simpler: their eyes. The art of diagnosis in ancient Egypt was built on acute observation, an intimate understanding of the human body, and a deep connection to the spiritual world. Without the help of sophisticated machines, Egyptian doctors relied heavily on their keen observational skills to identify illnesses, relying on the subtle cues the body would reveal. To a modern doctor, a patient's symptoms might appear as a collection of fragmented information: fever, cough, pain, each requiring a test, an instrument, or a machine to confirm the diagnosis. But for the ancient Egyptians, the body itself was the primary diagnostic tool. The human form, with all its changes and imbalances, was viewed as a map to the patient's overall health. Physicians trained to read this map could decipher the nature of the disease with surprising precision, even in the absence of advanced technology. When an Egyptian healer examined a patient, they began with the simplest of actions: observation. The appearance of the skin could tell a great deal about a person's health. Changes in skin color, texture, or temperature could indicate infections, diseases, or imbalances within the body. A pale complexion might signal anemia or dehydration, while a yellowish tint could point to liver problems or jaundice. The Egyptians understood that the skin was a reflection of what was happening inside, and they knew how to read these signs with the same careful attention a detective might give to an unraveling mystery. Pulse, too, was a key indicator. Egyptian physicians were well aware that a strong, steady pulse suggested good health, while a weak or erratic pulse could indicate illness or heart problems. By pressing gently on a patient's wrist, a healer could feel the rhythm of the pulse and detect subtle changes that would guide their diagnosis. This simple, yet effective technique gave them insight into the overall functioning of the body, helping to detect issues like fevers or circulatory problems. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian diagnosis was their focus on the eye. In ancient Egypt, the eye was not just a window to the world, It was also seen as a window to internal health. The condition of the eyes, whether they were clear, clouded, or infected, was considered a direct reflection of a person's overall well-being. Eye diseases, such as conjunctivitis or cataracts, were not only understood as physical ailments, but were also believed to be connected to spiritual imbalance. A doctor's ability to assess the condition of a patient's eyes could offer vital clues about their health, especially since the eyes were also thought to reveal the state of the soul. Alongside the eyes, Egyptian physicians would often take note of other sensory cues, such as the smell of the body, breath, or skin. Strong odors could indicate the presence of infection, particularly in cases of fever or digestive issues. By closely monitoring the smells emanating from a patient's body, physicians could discern the nature of the illness, providing another layer to their diagnostic skills. Despite lacking modern tools, Egyptian healers had a remarkable ability to make accurate diagnoses simply by paying attention to these subtle clues. They could diagnose conditions like tuberculosis, parasitic infections, and skin diseases, even though they did not have the knowledge of bacteria or viruses that we have today. Their understanding of anatomy and disease was rooted in keen observation, with the body itself acting as a diagnostic guide, leading the physician to the root cause of the illness. But the Egyptian approach to diagnosis was not limited to physical symptoms alone. It was often accompanied by a spiritual diagnosis, which we will explore in the next section. As we transition from this focus on physical observation, we will delve into how Egyptian doctors combined their observations with spiritual insight and magical beliefs, seeing the body not only as a physical entity but as a vessel for the soul. This unique blend of science and mysticism allowed them to approach healing from a holistic perspective, treating both the body and the spirit as interconnected parts of a larger, divine system. In the land of the ancient Egyptians, where the gods were deeply entwined in every aspect of life, illness was far more than a physical condition. It was often viewed as a divine message, a sign that something in the balance of life had gone awry. Disease was not simply caused by a viral infection or a physical injury, as we might think of it today. Rather, it was seen as an indication of spiritual or cosmic imbalance, a disturbance in the harmony between the individual and the divine forces that governed the world. To the ancient Egyptians, health was a reflection of spiritual alignment, and illness was seen as a punishment, a warning, or even a call for repentance. Disease, for the Egyptians, was not something that could be diagnosed or treated in isolation from the spiritual world. It was intimately linked to their belief in the gods, with physical ailments often interpreted as manifestations of divine wrath or moral failure. The gods, in their view, could send sickness as a form of punishment for sins, transgressions, or neglecting the proper rituals and offerings. If an individual became ill, it was not just the body that needed healing. The soul, the heart, and the relationship with the divine needed attention as well. For instance, an affliction such as blindness or paralysis might be seen as a punishment from the gods for some wrongdoing, or a warning that the person had strayed from the righteous path. Egyptian physicians, often also priests, understood this deeply spiritual aspect of illness. They didn't just treat the body, they also sought to restore balance in the soul. A physical ailment was viewed as a reflection of a spiritual imbalance, so healing was a process that required both medical knowledge and divine intervention. This was why Egyptian healers were not just skilled in herbs, surgery, or physical diagnosis, they were also well versed in rituals, prayers, and offerings designed to appease the gods and restore harmony between the individual and the divine. When a person fell ill, the first step in treatment was often a spiritual diagnosis. Healers, along with priests, would assess the patient's behavior, relationships, and religious practices to determine whether the illness was the result of divine displeasure or spiritual neglect. If it was believed that the gods had sent the illness, rituals would be performed to ask for forgiveness, appease the angry deities, and restore favor. These rituals could range from simple prayers to elaborate offerings, depending on the severity of the condition and the perceived cause. In some cases, the healer might also perform a magical treatment, reciting incantations that called upon powerful gods like Isis, Thoth, or Horus, whose intervention was believed to heal both the body and the spirit. In addition to rituals and prayers, amulets and charms played a crucial role in this spiritual healing process. Wearing an amulet inscribed with a prayer or invoking the protection of a particular god was believed to shield the wearer from evil spirits and divine wrath. Many of these amulets depicted the eye of Horus, the ankh or scarabs, all symbols tied to protection, life, and regeneration. These magical objects were thought to have inherent powers, and their use was often considered an essential part of restoring balance. Egyptian physicians, therefore, were not just doctors of the body, they were spiritual guides who helped patients navigate the complex relationship between their physical health and their spiritual well-being. Healing, in their eyes, was not merely a matter of fixing what was broken, it was about realigning the body, mind, and soul with the cosmic order. This view of health and disease made their diagnostic practices far more holistic than many of those in other ancient civilizations, where illness was often seen solely as a physical issue. The intertwining of physical observation and spiritual diagnosis was integral to Egyptian medicine. A physician would not simply examine the body for signs of disease, but would also seek to understand the deeper spiritual context. Were the gods angry? Had the patient sinned? Was there an imbalance in the cosmic forces that needed to be corrected? These questions were just as important to an Egyptian healer as the physical symptoms. As we move on from this fascinating intersection of spirituality and physical health, we will turn our attention to the types of diseases the Egyptians recognized and how they classified them. Despite their mystical approach, the Egyptians were keen observers of the human body and had a deep understanding of diseases like tuberculosis, parasitic infections, and skin disorders. In the next section, we will explore how their diagnostic methods allowed them to categorize and treat a range of illnesses, blending observation with spiritual insight to achieve a holistic form of care. In the scorching heat of the Egyptian desert, where the Nile River wound its way through the heart of civilization, the ancient Egyptians were not only brilliant architects, builders, and astronomers, they were also keen observers of the human body and its ailments. Despite their lack of modern diagnostic tools, such as microscopes or X-rays, they were remarkably adept at identifying and classifying diseases, many of which we still recognize today. The Egyptians were pioneers in understanding the nature of illness and laid the foundation for the medical knowledge that would influence generations to come. While their understanding of disease was certainly influenced by spiritual and magical beliefs, the Egyptians also had a practical and observational approach to diagnosing illnesses. The symptoms patients exhibited changes in skin appearance, fever, swelling, and pain told the Egyptian physician a great deal about the nature of the disease. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, such as the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus, provide a glimpse into the range of conditions that these physicians could identify and treat, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of health despite the lack of modern technology. One of the most common and significant diseases identified by ancient Egyptians was tuberculosis, or the disease of the lungs, as it was often referred to. Tuberculosis was widespread in ancient Egypt, and physicians were keenly aware of its symptoms: persistent coughing, weight loss, night sweats, and difficulty breathing. Though they did not know the bacterium responsible for the disease, they had clearly recognized its symptoms and understood its debilitating effects. Treatments were primarily herbal, with remedies like garlic and honey being used to ease the coughing and reduce the symptoms. Some scholars believe that the Egyptians may have used inhalations of incense or other smoke-based remedies to ease respiratory conditions, similar to modern-day practices. In addition to tuberculosis, parasitic infections were another significant health issue in ancient Egypt. The Nile, while a source of life, also contributed to the spread of various waterborne diseases, one of the most notorious being bilharzia, also known as schistosomiasis. This parasitic infection, caused by flatworms that entered the human body through contaminated water, led to painful inflammation of the liver, bladder, and intestines. The Egyptians were keenly aware of these afflictions, describing symptoms such as bloating, pain in the abdomen, and blood in the urine. They documented methods to treat these infections, often using herbal remedies like pomegranate bark, which we now know contains compounds that can kill the parasitic worms. Skin diseases were also a major concern in ancient Egypt, where the harsh sun and environment took their toll on the skin. Conditions like eczema, psoriasis, and leprosy were common, and Egyptian physicians were familiar with these diseases, often using soothing balms made from natural oils and resins to treat them. Leprosy, in particular, was understood as a disease that affected the skin, nerves, and mucous membranes, though it was not until much later in history that we fully understood its bacterial origins. The Egyptians may not have known the specific cause of leprosy, but they had certainly recognized its distinctive symptoms, patchy skin, nerve damage, and deformities, and had developed treatments to manage it. What is perhaps most impressive about Egyptian medicine is their ability to recognize and describe diseases that we are still learning to understand today. For example, evidence suggests that the Egyptians had a basic understanding of mental illnesses. While these were often attributed to spiritual disturbances or possession by evil spirits, Egyptian physicians did document conditions that resemble what we now identify as mental health disorders. Symptoms such as sudden mood changes, extreme paranoia, and delusions were recorded, and treatments typically involved both physical and spiritual methods. Rituals, prayers, and amulets were often prescribed alongside herbal remedies, like mandrake root, which has psychoactive properties. While the Egyptians might not have classified these conditions as we do today, their recognition of mental illness was ahead of its time and indicates a holistic approach to health that extended beyond the body to encompass the mind and spirit. The ancient Egyptians also had their own understanding of diseases that we might consider more obscure today. Conditions like cancer were described, though the Egyptians attributed them to a buildup of internal mucus or fluid, rather than recognizing them as the result of cellular mutations. Ancient texts document the appearance of tumors, particularly in the breast and stomach, and treatments often included surgery or cauterization. Though the Egyptians could not identify cancer as we do, their ability to recognize and attempt to treat growths or tumors shows an awareness of internal health issues that modern medicine would later build upon. In addition to these familiar diseases, the Egyptians were also attuned to conditions that involved chronic pain or dysfunction. For example, they identified arthritis-like conditions, particularly in the elderly, and recognized the importance of joints and bones in overall health. Their understanding of fractures and bone diseases was notably advanced, as evidenced by their treatments for broken bones and dislocations, which included splints, bandages, and in some cases, surgery. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, a surgical treatise, even describes procedures for resetting fractured limbs and treating joint pain, which would become a foundation for later orthopedic practices. The Egyptians were also keenly aware of the impact of diet and lifestyle on health. Malnutrition and digestive disorders were common in a society where food supply could be unpredictable, and the Egyptians understood the links between diet, digestion, and overall well-being. Records show that they diagnosed and treated conditions such as bloating, constipation, and dysentery, with remedies ranging from herbal teas to fasting. They understood that some diseases, especially those related to the stomach and intestines, could be caused by what and how one ate. While the Egyptians were not equipped with the tools and knowledge that modern doctors possess, their approach to disease diagnosis was remarkably sophisticated. Their ability to observe the human body, recognize symptoms, and classify conditions showed a deep understanding of the natural world and its effects on the human form. Though their methods were based on observation and intuition rather than modern scientific inquiry, their documentation of disease was strikingly accurate, and many of the diseases they identified are still prevalent today. As we continue to explore the medical practices of ancient Egypt, the next section will examine how these diagnoses were treated. The Egyptians not only had a keen eye for identifying illness, but they also developed a complex system of remedies that combined physical treatments with spiritual practices. From herbs and surgery to incantations and divine intervention, The Egyptians created a medical framework that blended the material and the mystical in their quest for healing. In the heart of ancient Egypt, where the sands of the desert stretch endlessly and the Nile flows as a lifeline through the land, the practice of mummification stood as one of the most remarkable achievements of Egyptian civilization. But mummification was far more than just a burial ritual. It was a sophisticated medical process, intricately linked to Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife and the preservation of life itself. While many today view mummification as an artistic or religious tradition, it was also an advanced medical procedure that required an intimate understanding of the human body, preservation techniques, and anatomy. The Egyptians didn't simply preserve the body for the sake of preservation. They did it with the belief that the soul would need a perfectly preserved vessel to live on in the afterlife. The mummification process began soon after death, with a ritualistic preparation of the body. It was a highly specialized task, usually performed by priests or skilled embalmers who worked in specially designated facilities, some of which were dedicated to royal families. The first step was the removal of the internal organs, a procedure which demonstrated the Egyptians' remarkable understanding of anatomy. The heart was typically left in place, as it was considered the seat of life and would be needed in the afterlife for judgment. However, the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver were removed, each serving a specific purpose in the afterlife. These organs were carefully preserved in separate canopic jars, which were sealed and placed in the tomb to accompany the deceased. Once the internal organs were removed, the body was dehydrated using natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate found in the desert. Natron, known for its powerful desiccating properties, was applied to the body and left in place for a period of 40 days. This step was critical in preventing decomposition, as it drew out the moisture from the body and helped preserve the skin and tissues. The drying process was not only an essential part of preserving the body, but also a significant part of the medical knowledge of the time. The Egyptians knew that moisture was the enemy of preservation, and they understood how to use the elements of nature to their advantage, much like modern-day preservation techniques, though without the benefit of refrigeration or chemical preservatives. Once the body was sufficiently dried, the embalming specialists would apply oils and resins to the skin. These substances helped to further protect the body from decay, while also imparting a distinctive, aromatic scent. The skin would be massaged with these substances, ensuring that every surface was coated. The body was then wrapped in layers of linen bandages, sometimes with amulets or charms placed between the layers to protect the deceased in the afterlife. These bandages were not just for wrapping the body, they served as a kind of safeguard, reinforcing the body's sanctity as it prepared for its journey into eternity. The process of mummification was meticulous, with each step carried out according to a strict set of religious and medical procedures. The embalming process reflected the Egyptians' belief that death was not an end but a transition, a journey to another realm, where the body and soul would be reunited. The knowledge required to carry out such a delicate and sophisticated procedure was not only artistic but also medical. It demonstrated an advanced understanding of human anatomy and preservation techniques that would not be surpassed for centuries. Mummification was the foundation of the Egyptian worldview on death, serving as a safeguard for both the body and soul as they made their way into the afterlife. But the practice was not just about preserving the physical body, it was about ensuring that the deceased would be able to live on, eternally protected. The complex rituals involved in mummification reflected an understanding that death was a passage to another realm, where the preservation of the body was just as important as the spiritual practices that accompanied it. Having explored the intricate and scientifically advanced process of mummification, we now turn our focus to the spiritual aspects of the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that the journey to eternity required not only a preserved body, but also the guidance of powerful rituals and divine protection. In the next section, we will delve into the spiritual side of Egyptian medicine, exploring how healing extended beyond the body to ensure a safe passage to the afterlife, where the soul would undergo trials and be judged by the gods. In ancient Egypt, the journey to the afterlife was just as critical, if not more so, than the life one lived on earth. The Egyptians believed that the body and soul were inextricably linked, and thus, healing was not confined to the physical realm alone. Just as the body required mummification to preserve it for eternity, the soul needed its own form of protection and healing to safely navigate the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, the transition from life to death was viewed as a continuation of one's spiritual journey, and this journey demanded just as much attention and care as the body's preservation. The rituals designed to heal and protect the soul were integral to Egyptian medical and spiritual practices. One of the most significant of these was the opening of the mouth ceremony, a ritual performed to ensure that the deceased could breathe, speak, and eat in the afterlife. This ceremony was not only an essential part of the burial process, but also a vital step in the spiritual healing of the soul. By opening the mouth, the deceased was believed to be granted the ability to interact with the gods, make offerings, and partake in the divine sustenance that would nourish the soul in the afterlife. It was thought that the deceased would need these abilities to successfully face the challenges and judgment they would encounter in the underworld. This ritual allowed the soul to remain connected to the physical world, ensuring that it could partake in offerings and prayers meant to sustain it on its journey. But the physical rituals alone were not enough. The Egyptians believed that the soul's passage through the afterlife was fraught with peril, and that without the proper guidance, it could be lost or trapped in the underworld. This is where the Book of the Dead came into play, a collection of spells, prayers, and incantations designed to protect the soul from dangers and lead it safely to the afterlife. The Book of the Dead served as a manual for the deceased, providing the necessary tools to navigate the dangerous trials of the afterlife, including encounters with fearsome gods, spirits, and obstacles. These spells acted like a map, guiding the soul past threats and ensuring it would be judged favorably by the gods, particularly Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The rituals and texts in the Book of the Dead were not just words, they were seen as magical formulas that could actually influence the spiritual world. The Egyptians believed that words and spells carried immense power, capable of unlocking divine protection or invoking the god's mercy. To the ancient Egyptians, the recitation of these spells was just as important as the physical process of mummification, with the belief that the soul needed both physical preservation and spiritual safeguarding. What's fascinating about these spiritual practices is that they were treated with the same reverence and seriousness as physical healing. In fact, the soul's journey into the afterlife was considered the ultimate form of healing. The soul had to be protected from curses, evil spirits, and the potential of being lost or judged unworthy. As a result, the Egyptians created a comprehensive system of rituals, spells, and prayers that acted as a form of spiritual medicine, ensuring that the soul could successfully transition to the next life, free of obstacles. These practices reveal an intriguing view of health that extends beyond the physical body into the realm of the spirit. The Egyptians understood that the body might perish, but the soul's well-being was just as critical for the continuation of life after death. Healing, in this sense, was not confined to the earthly realm, it was a cosmic and eternal process. Now that we have explored the rituals designed to heal and protect the soul, we move forward to the next chapter, where we will examine the role of Egyptian medical texts, particularly the Book of the Dead, in shaping both spiritual and physical health. These texts not only served as guides for the deceased, but also provided valuable lessons on health, disease, and healing for the living. The spiritual practices surrounding death and the afterlife were deeply intertwined with the healing arts, blending the sacred with the practical in ways that continue to intrigue us today. The Book of the Dead is one of the most iconic and essential texts in ancient Egyptian culture, often regarded as a spiritual guide for the deceased. Yet, beneath its layers of religious and mystical guidance lies a surprising aspect of this ancient manuscript, its practical use as a medical text, addressing both physical and spiritual health in the afterlife. While it's famous for its spells designed to navigate the underworld, the Book of the Dead also served as a crucial manual for ensuring the preservation of the body and the soul, protecting both from the dangers of decay, disease, and spiritual misfortune. What many don't realize is that this text was not only about life after death but was intertwined with the Egyptians' understanding of health and wellness in both realms. The Book of the Dead was a collection of spells, prayers, and rituals designed to protect the soul and guide it through the challenges of the afterlife. These challenges were not limited to spiritual dangers, they included physical ones as well. The Egyptians believed that the afterlife, much like life on earth, required the soul to be in good health in order to survive the trials it would face, especially during the crucial judgment by Osiris, the god of the underworld. For the soul to pass through the afterlife unscathed, it needed not only spiritual protection, but also a form of medical safeguarding against the dangers that lurked in the afterlife's metaphorical landscape. One of the key aspects of the Book of the Dead from a medical perspective is its spells aimed at preventing physical ailments. The Egyptians were keenly aware that disease did not end with death. Their concept of afterlife health extended beyond the physical realm. In fact, certain passages in the Book of the Dead were explicitly designed to ward off diseases, including those caused by parasites or other infections, which were common afflictions in ancient Egypt. Given the lack of modern understanding of pathogens, the ancient Egyptians attributed these illnesses to spiritual causes. However, their recognition of bodily afflictions and the need to protect the deceased from illness in the afterlife is significant, as it reflects a broader understanding of disease that went beyond the physical body and into the realm of cosmic balance. The Book of the Dead also featured spells that protected the deceased from the decay of the body, both literal and spiritual. As part of the mummification process, the Egyptians believed that the body needed to be preserved for the soul's journey. The spells, therefore, were not just magical invocations, but also acted as a safeguard against the disintegration of the physical form. For example, certain spells were intended to prevent the body from being attacked by worms or insects, which were seen as agents of decomposition and destruction. This belief aligns with their medical knowledge of bodily decay, and these protective incantations ensured that the body would remain intact for the soul's reunion with the physical form during its passage into the afterlife. Another critical function of the Book of the Dead was its guidance on the spiritual health of the deceased. For the ancient Egyptians, the soul's journey was fraught with peril, and the soul needed not just physical preservation, but also spiritual protection. The rituals and spells within the text served to align the soul with the divine, offering divine favor and guidance to help it navigate the trials of the afterlife. In addition to physical ailments, the soul was believed to be vulnerable to spiritual threats, such as evil spirits, deceitful gods, or the risk of being judged unworthy by Osiris. The spells in the Book of the Dead were designed to protect the deceased from these dangers, ensuring that the soul would be purified and ultimately deemed worthy of eternal life. These spiritual and medical practices were often carried out by priests and healers, who not only performed rituals but also recited these powerful spells on behalf of the deceased. The role of the priest as both spiritual guide and medical practitioner is evident in these rites. Priests were entrusted with the responsibility of interpreting the Book of the Dead's contents, ensuring that the deceased received the appropriate rites to secure their place in the afterlife. This blending of religious and medical knowledge highlights the interconnectedness of physical health, spiritual well-being, and divine intervention in Egyptian thought. The priests who performed these ceremonies were not merely offering prayers, they were using their medical knowledge to ensure that both the body and soul of the deceased were treated with the utmost care. In this sense, the Book of the Dead can be viewed as an ancient form of holistic medicine, addressing both the spiritual and physical aspects of health. The rituals contained within the text were not just religious ceremonies, they were integral to the overall health of the deceased, ensuring that they could survive the journey through the afterlife and be reunited with the divine. This dual approach to health, combining spiritual rituals with medical knowledge, illustrates the sophisticated understanding the Egyptians had of the connection between body and soul. The Book of the Dead was also a tool for the living, not just the dead. While its primary purpose was to guide the soul through the afterlife, the text also served as a means for the living to learn about disease, healing, and the spiritual practices necessary to maintain their own health. In many ways, the Book of the Dead offered the living a manual for dealing with illness, disease, and the inevitable transition into death. It provided insight into how disease was perceived, how it was treated, and how it was understood to affect the soul. In this way, the text was not just a posthumous guide but a part of the living's medical and spiritual education. Now that we have explored how the Book of the Dead served as a guide for both spiritual and physical health in the afterlife, we transition to the next section, where we will look at the broader role of Egyptian medicine in prolonging life. We will explore the practices, rituals, and remedies used by the ancient Egyptians to promote longevity and prevent illness in the living, highlighting their desire to maintain a healthy life, both in this world and in the next. The ancient Egyptians, often celebrated for their monumental achievements in architecture and art, also laid the foundations for many of the medical practices we rely on today. Despite the gap of thousands of years between their time and the present day, the principles and techniques developed by Egyptian healers still resonate within modern medicine. From their understanding of human anatomy to their pioneering surgical techniques and disease management practices, the ancient Egyptians' medical knowledge was far ahead of its time, influencing the evolution of medical care long after their civilization faded into history. One of the key areas where ancient Egyptian medicine influenced modern practices is in the realm of surgery. Although the Egyptians did not have the sophisticated diagnostic tools and anesthesia that we use today, their surgical methods were impressively advanced for their time. Archaeological findings of surgical instruments in Egyptian tombs, scalpels, forceps, and surgical saws reveal that Egyptian physicians performed delicate surgeries, such as trepanation, the removal of part of the skull, bone setting, and even eye surgery. These instruments, while primitive compared to modern counterparts, bear a striking resemblance to those used by contemporary surgeons, suggesting a direct link between ancient and modern surgical techniques. For example, the ancient Egyptians performed procedures like trepanation with tools that were capable of making precise incisions. They demonstrated a basic understanding of bone anatomy and the delicate nature of brain surgery, which, despite the risks involved, led to many patients surviving the procedure. Modern neurosurgery, though infinitely more advanced, owes some of its roots to these early practices. The precision required to remove part of the skull without damaging surrounding tissues, and the use of tools to manage fractures and dislocations, are practices still central to surgical disciplines today. Additionally, Egyptian healers were experts in treating wounds and managing infection. They applied herbal remedies and substances with antibacterial properties, such as honey, to wounds, an early form of antiseptic treatment. Their understanding of infection and the importance of cleanliness, though not fully understood by the Egyptians in scientific terms, laid the groundwork for the modern medical approach to wound care. Just as we today use iodine and other antiseptics, the Egyptians used natural substances like resin and oils to protect wounds from infection. This use of natural remedies reflects a deep understanding of the body's needs and has influenced the development of modern treatments for wound care and infection prevention. Moreover, the Egyptians' knowledge of anatomy, while based on observation rather than dissection, was impressively accurate. The careful process of embalming and mummification required detailed knowledge of the human body's structure, as embalming priests had to remove and preserve internal organs, including the brain, which was a delicate procedure. This anatomical knowledge prefigured the understanding of human physiology that would later be explored by Greek and Roman scholars, forming the backbone of modern medicine. The preservation of bodies for the afterlife also led to the development of surgical techniques related to organ removal, preservation, and the treatment of body parts. Herbal remedies, another key aspect of Egyptian medicine, also had a profound influence on modern pharmacology. The Egyptians used a vast array of plants for medicinal purposes, many of which have been confirmed by modern science to contain valuable therapeutic properties. For instance, they used aloe vera for its soothing properties in treating burns, a remedy still widely used in modern medicine. The knowledge of herbs like garlic and myrrh in treating infections and ailments provided a foundation for the development of modern pharmaceuticals. Egyptian healers had a rich understanding of plant-based treatments, and many of their remedies have stood the test of time, influencing current herbal and natural therapies. The striking similarity between ancient Egyptian medical instruments and their modern counterparts is not just a testament to the ingenuity of Egyptian physicians, it underscores a continuity of thought and practice in medicine where ancient wisdom has been built upon over millennia. The seeds of modern surgical and medical practices were planted long ago in ancient Egypt, and many of the principles they developed continue to shape the medical world today. Having explored the enduring impact of Egyptian medical practices, the next section will shift focus to pharmacology. We will delve into the crucial role of Egyptian medicine in the development of modern drugs and therapies, examining how their use of plants, minerals, and natural substances provided the foundation for today's pharmaceutical advancements. The Egyptians' understanding of the healing properties of natural substances was pivotal in shaping the future of medicine, bridging the gap between ancient remedies and contemporary drug development. The practice of medicine in ancient Egypt was not confined to physical healing alone. It was deeply intertwined with the use of natural substances to treat ailments, laying the groundwork for modern pharmacology. The Egyptians were among the first to systematically document and utilize plants, minerals, and animal products for medicinal purposes. Their understanding of these natural substances, many of which are still used today, reflects their remarkable ability to observe the healing properties of the natural world and apply them to improve human health. In many ways, Egyptian pharmacology was not only ahead of its time, but also a foundational element of modern drug development. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the most comprehensive medical texts from ancient Egypt, is a key source of information on the herbal remedies used by Egyptian healers. This papyrus contains over 700 remedies, many of which involve plants, oils, and minerals. The use of garlic, for example, was widely documented for its medicinal properties. The Egyptians were aware of garlic's ability to treat infections and its potential antibiotic effects, knowledge that modern science has confirmed today. Garlic, rich in allicin, is known for its antibacterial and antifungal properties, and it continues to be used as a natural remedy for various infections. In ancient Egypt, garlic was considered a potent medicine, capable of treating everything from respiratory issues to digestive ailments. Its continued use in modern medicine is a testament to the Egyptians' early understanding of natural healing. Another significant example of Egyptian pharmacology is the use of honey, which was applied to wounds as an antibacterial agent. The Egyptians were aware that honey's antimicrobial properties could help heal wounds and prevent infection. Modern science now confirms that honey, particularly raw honey, contains enzymes that produce hydrogen peroxide, a compound with natural antiseptic properties. The use of honey in ancient Egyptian medicine not only helped to treat physical wounds, but also reflected their broader understanding of how natural substances could support the body's healing process. The Egyptians also made use of other plants and minerals with medicinal properties, such as frankincense and myrrh, both of which were used for their antiseptic and anti-inflammatory qualities. These substances were not only used in religious rituals but also in medical treatments. Frankincense, for example, was believed to help with respiratory issues and to have calming effects on the body. Myrrh, similarly, was applied to treat digestive problems and skin conditions. These substances, prized for their healing properties, are still used in various forms of alternative medicine today, showing the enduring influence of Egyptian pharmacology. Beyond herbal remedies, the Egyptians experimented with chemical compounds and healing substances in ways that laid the groundwork for pharmaceutical development. For example, they were among the first to distill essential oils, which would later play a crucial role in modern aromatherapy and pharmaceutical treatments. Their experimentation with minerals and metals, such as copper and lead, paved the way for the use of certain metals in medical practices, which was expanded upon by later civilizations like the Greeks and Romans. The Egyptians' approach to pharmacology was not purely empirical, it was intertwined with their religious and spiritual beliefs. Medicine was a holistic practice that combined physical remedies with magical rituals, demonstrating the interconnectedness of the body, mind, and spirit. This holistic approach to healing would go on to influence later medical traditions, including the Greek and Roman systems of medicine. As we look at the legacy of Egyptian pharmacology, it's clear that their early use of natural remedies, their understanding of chemical compounds, and their pioneering approach to medicinal plants have shaped modern pharmaceutical practices. The seeds of modern medicine were planted in ancient Egypt, and many of the treatments we use today can be traced back to the practices that Egyptian healers refined thousands of years ago. Now that we've examined how Egyptian pharmacology has influenced modern medicine, we will shift focus to how this knowledge spread to other ancient civilizations. In the next section, we'll explore how Egyptian medical practices, particularly in the areas of pharmacology and disease treatment, influenced the medical practices of the Greeks and Romans, who in turn shaped the foundations of Western medicine. The influence of ancient Egyptian medicine on the development of Western medical practices is undeniable. Despite the passage of time, many of the advanced techniques and insights into anatomy, surgery, and disease management developed by Egyptian healers found their way to Greece and Rome, shaping the foundations of Greco-Roman medicine and, by extension, modern Western medicine. The Egyptians' focus on observation, diagnosis, and the treatment of ailments through a blend of natural remedies and surgical techniques became the cornerstone of medical knowledge for later civilizations. The exchange of medical knowledge between Egypt and Greece was not merely intellectual but also practical. Greek physicians, particularly those who sought to improve their craft, traveled to Egypt, where they studied under the Egyptian priest-physicians who were well versed in the healing arts. The Egyptians' deep understanding of human anatomy, gained through their elaborate process of embalming and mummification, was a crucial influence on the Greek and Roman approaches to medicine. Unlike other ancient cultures, the Egyptians had a systematic and detailed knowledge of the body, having spent centuries perfecting the art of preserving it after death. This wealth of anatomical knowledge became a key learning point for Greek scholars, who adapted and expanded upon it to form the basis of their own medical traditions. One of the most influential figures in the history of medicine is Hippocrates, often referred to as the father of medicine. While Hippocrates is famous for his contributions to medical ethics and the establishment of medicine as a rational discipline, much of his medical knowledge was shaped by the teachings he received from Egyptian physicians. Hippocrates is known to have traveled to Egypt to study, where he was exposed to the Egyptians' advanced understanding of anatomy and disease. In Egypt, he would have encountered the same diagnostic principles that relied on careful observation and the use of natural remedies, which would later form the foundation of his own medical practices. Hippocrates' focus on the importance of patient observation, the categorization of diseases, and the systematic approach to diagnosis were directly influenced by Egyptian medical traditions. His approach to medicine, emphasizing observation and empirical treatment, echoed the methods used by Egyptian healers who relied on their sharp sense of observation, the careful study of symptoms, and a holistic view of health. While Hippocrates was instrumental in shaping Greek medicine, another towering figure in ancient medicine, Galen, was equally influenced by Egyptian practices. Galen, a Roman physician who lived in the 2nd century AD, was deeply indebted to Egyptian medicine, especially in his studies of anatomy and surgery. Galen's work in anatomy, which included detailed dissections of animals and humans, was based on the anatomical knowledge he encountered through his study of Egyptian medical traditions. The Egyptians' mastery of mummification allowed them to understand the intricacies of the human body in ways that many other ancient cultures did not. Galen's anatomical studies and his exploration of the circulatory system, muscles, and bones were heavily influenced by Egyptian methods, which focused on understanding the body's structure and function. Furthermore, Galen's surgical techniques, which included treatments for fractures, wounds, and internal injuries, drew on the same principles used by Egyptian physicians in their approach to surgery and wound management. The Egyptian influence on Greco-Roman medicine was not confined to anatomy and surgery alone. Egyptian medicine's integration of herbal remedies and natural substances also made its way into Roman and Greek medical practices. Just as Egyptian healers had used plants like garlic, myrrh, and frankincense for their medicinal properties, These same remedies were later adopted and expanded upon by Greek and Roman physicians. The therapeutic use of herbs and minerals, along with the understanding of their healing properties, was passed down to the medical traditions of both Greece and Rome. In fact, many of the same plants and substances that were used in Egyptian medicine continue to be utilized in modern pharmacology. Beyond the tangible contributions of Egyptian medical practices, the Egyptians' holistic approach to health also had a lasting impact on Greco-Roman medicine. Egyptian medicine viewed health as a balance of physical, spiritual, and environmental factors, a perspective that influenced later Greek and Roman thinking. Hippocrates, for instance, is often credited with introducing the idea of the humoral theory of medicine, which, though developed further by the Greeks, was influenced by Egyptian medical views on balance and the interconnectedness of the body, mind, and spirit. The Egyptians' emphasis on divine intervention in the healing process also resonated in Greek and Roman medical thinking. While the Greeks and Romans eventually moved towards a more secular and rational approach to medicine, the belief that illness could have a spiritual cause remained an undercurrent in their practices. Egyptian rituals, spells, and amulets that were used to ward off evil spirits or invoke divine healing were incorporated into Greco-Roman healing traditions. Even the concept of medical ethics, which Hippocrates famously advanced, was influenced by the Egyptian understanding of the sacred role of the healer. Physicians in Egypt were often seen as mediators between the gods and the people, and this idea found its way into Greek and Roman conceptions of the healer's responsibility to both the patient and the divine. By the time the Roman Empire was in full swing, Egyptian medical knowledge had been firmly integrated into Greco-Roman medical practices. Egyptian physicians who had studied and worked alongside Greek and Roman scholars contributed to the development of medical schools, where knowledge of both anatomy and disease management was passed down through generations. The Egyptians' rich tradition of medical knowledge, including their understanding of surgery, anatomy, pharmacology, and the interconnectedness of the body and spirit, formed the cornerstone of what would later become the foundations of Western medicine. As we consider the lasting legacy of Egyptian medicine in the context of Greece and Rome, it is clear that the medical wisdom of the ancient Egyptians has endured. The knowledge passed down through these civilizations became the bedrock upon which much of modern Western medicine is built. Today, the ancient practices of observation, diagnosis, and treatment pioneered by Egyptian healers continue to inform our understanding of health, disease, and healing. In the next section, we will explore how this ancient knowledge has been rediscovered and applied in contemporary medical research, especially in the fields of surgery and pharmacology, demonstrating that the roots of modern medicine are, indeed, deeply embedded in the wisdom of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptian medicine was not only advanced in its understanding of human health, but also pioneering in its creation of structured systems of care. While we often focus on individual practices and treatments, the Egyptians were instrumental in laying the foundations for the medical institutions and frameworks that form the backbone of modern healthcare systems. Their ability to establish organized medical structures complete with specialized training, guilds, and institutionalized healing centers created a blueprint for the health systems we rely on today. One of the most significant contributions of ancient Egyptian medicine was the establishment of the first medical schools. These institutions, often linked to royal courts and temples, were crucial for passing down knowledge to successive generations of physicians. In these schools, aspiring healers were taught not only the practices of medicine but also the philosophical and spiritual aspects of healing. The blending of science and spirituality that marked Egyptian medicine became a hallmark of future health systems, influencing the way medicine would evolve across the globe. Medical knowledge in Egypt was passed down from one generation to the next, not just by individual practitioners, but within these organized educational frameworks. This model of formalized medical training would be adopted by the Greeks and Romans, further shaping the development of Western medicine. In addition to medical schools, the Egyptians established what could be considered the first formal healers' guilds, groups of trained practitioners who worked together to provide care. These guilds were often connected to temples, which served as both religious and medical centers. Temples, with their association with gods of healing such as Imhotep and Sekhmet, were seen as the ultimate places of healing, where patients could receive not only physical treatment but also spiritual care. The temples housed large numbers of physicians and healers who worked together to treat a range of ailments, from simple injuries to more complex diseases. The integration of religious and medical healing created a system that was holistic, one that viewed the human body and spirit as interconnected. The temple-based healing system set the foundation for future medical institutions, particularly in the Greek and Roman worlds, where temples also played a central role in the delivery of healthcare. Greek and Roman physicians, such as Hippocrates and Galen, studied in Egypt and were greatly influenced by its institutionalized approach to healthcare. The Egyptian model of healing, where medicine was practiced in both a spiritual and practical context, deeply impacted Greek and Roman medicine, leading to the development of public health institutions, hospitals, and guilds of healers. Even today, we see echoes of the Egyptian influence in modern hospitals and health systems. While the primary focus of contemporary medicine is more scientific and less spiritual, many modern hospitals incorporate holistic care, providing not only physical treatments but also emotional and spiritual support for patients. The integration of physical healing with emotional and psychological well-being is a concept that can be traced back to the Egyptian temples, where healing was a multifaceted process, aimed at restoring balance to both the body and the soul. The creation of institutionalized healthcare systems in Egypt, the establishment of formal training programs for physicians, and the use of temples as centers of healing set the stage for the development of modern medical institutions worldwide. These early systems, rooted in a combination of practical and spiritual care, continue to influence the way we approach healthcare today. Having explored the establishment of medical institutions in ancient Egypt, the next section will delve into how Egyptian medical knowledge spread across the world, influencing other ancient civilizations. We will examine how the exchange of medical wisdom across cultures shaped the development of health systems in places like Greece, Rome, and beyond, laying the groundwork for modern global healthcare practices. The reach of ancient Egyptian medical knowledge extended far beyond the borders of Egypt, influencing neighboring civilizations and contributing to the rise of medicine across the Middle East. Through trade routes, cultural exchanges, and the migration of scholars, Egyptian healing practices became an integral part of medical systems in places like Mesopotamia, Persia, and eventually the Islamic world. The Egyptians' expertise in anatomy, surgery, and the use of medicinal plants was particularly influential, helping to lay the foundations for advancements in these areas across the ancient world. One of the key factors that facilitated the spread of Egyptian medical knowledge was the region's extensive trade networks. Egypt, positioned at the crossroads of Africa and the Near East, was a central hub for commerce and intellectual exchange. As goods and ideas traveled along trade routes, so too did Egyptian practices. Egyptian medicine, with its rich understanding of the human body, surgical techniques, and plant-based remedies, became an important part of the shared knowledge base of ancient civilizations in the Middle East. In Mesopotamia, for example, Egyptian medical practices were absorbed into the Babylonian and Assyrian cultures. The Babylonians, known for their advancements in astrology and mathematics, also took inspiration from Egyptian healing methods, especially in areas like diagnosis and treatment. Egyptian techniques for diagnosing diseases based on physical observation and the use of herbal remedies were adapted by Babylonian healers. In particular, the Babylonians' use of plants for medicinal purposes mirrors the Egyptian approach to pharmacology. Egyptian herbs like garlic, myrrh, and frankincense, which had been used in Egyptian medicine for their antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties, found their way into Babylonian texts and medical practices. The Persians, too, were significantly influenced by Egyptian medicine, particularly through the exchange of knowledge along the Silk Road, which connected the Mediterranean world with Central Asia. Persian scholars, who valued learning and innovation, sought out Egyptian knowledge on anatomy, surgery, and pharmacology, integrating it into their own healing traditions. Persian medical texts from the time contain many references to Egyptian methods and even mention specific Egyptian healers who traveled to Persia to share their expertise. Perhaps one of the most profound impacts of Egyptian medicine was its influence on the Islamic Golden Age, a period of intellectual flourishing from the 8th to the 14th centuries. During this time, scholars in the Islamic world translated and preserved the works of ancient civilizations, including those of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The famous Persian physician Avicenna ibn Sina is one such scholar who cited Egyptian medical texts and practices in his own work, particularly in his seminal text, The Canon of Medicine. Avicenna's writing built upon the anatomical and pharmacological knowledge that had been passed down from Egypt, further expanding on the Egyptians' understanding of the human body and disease management. The medical knowledge shared by the Egyptians played a critical role in the development of medical thought during the Islamic Golden Age, where hospitals and medical schools became centers for learning and innovation. In particular, Egyptian techniques for surgery and disease management influenced the practices of Islamic physicians. The use of surgical instruments, the importance of hygiene and sterilization in wound care, and the application of herbal medicines were all rooted in Egyptian traditions and were further refined by scholars during this period. The Islamic scholars who followed in their footsteps laid the groundwork for many of the medical practices that would later influence European medicine during the Renaissance. Egyptian medicine's legacy, therefore, was not confined to the borders of the Nile. It spread through the Middle East, reaching ancient Babylonia, Persia, and later the Islamic world, where it shaped medical practices for centuries. The exchange of knowledge and practices among these civilizations contributed to the growth of medicine and the eventual development of more sophisticated healthcare systems in the Western world. As we look at the flow of Egyptian medical knowledge across the Middle East, we now shift our focus to the lasting influence of this wisdom on the Western world. In the next section, we will examine how Egyptian medical practices were integrated into the Greco-Roman world and eventually into the Renaissance period, where they played a key role in the revival of scientific and medical knowledge. The medical legacy of ancient Egypt stretches far beyond the borders of the Nile, leaving an indelible mark on the civilizations that followed, particularly Greece and Rome. The influence of Egyptian healing practices on the development of medical knowledge in the Greco-Roman world was profound, shaping the course of Western medicine and laying the foundations for many modern medical principles. Central to this transmission of knowledge was the role of renowned Egyptian physicians, such as Imhotep, whose wisdom and practices were revered by Greek and Roman scholars. These healers' contributions, combined with the Egyptian emphasis on anatomy, diagnosis, surgery, and pharmacology, played a pivotal role in the evolution of medical thought, ultimately influencing Western medicine through the Renaissance and into the modern era. Imhotep, the first known physician in history, is often regarded as the father of medicine by both the Egyptians and later cultures. He lived during the Third Dynasty of Egypt and was not only a skilled physician, but also an architect, priest, and sage. His fame spread across the ancient world, and his name was invoked by Greek physicians such as Hippocrates and Galen, who admired his methods and teachings. Imhotep's legendary status in both Egypt and the broader Mediterranean world was built upon his extensive knowledge of anatomy and disease. His writings, though lost to history, influenced the way later cultures viewed the relationship between the human body and disease. His approach to healing, which combined practical knowledge with spiritual considerations, would resonate in the medical systems of Greece and Rome for centuries. The Greek physician, Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, is considered one of the most important figures in the history of medical practice. However, Hippocrates' medical knowledge and philosophy were not developed in isolation. Much of his understanding of health, diagnosis, and treatment was influenced by Egyptian medical practices. Hippocrates is known to have traveled to Egypt to study, where he encountered the advanced medical knowledge of Egyptian healers. Egyptian physicians had long emphasized the importance of observation in diagnosing diseases, an approach that Hippocrates adopted and formalized in his own medical practice. The idea that disease was a result of an imbalance in the body's natural humors, a concept developed by Hippocrates, mirrors the Egyptian understanding of disease as a disturbance in the body's internal harmony, a concept rooted in their holistic approach to health. Moreover, Hippocrates' famous Hippocratic Oath, which laid the ethical foundation for medical practice, was shaped by Egyptian traditions. The Egyptians had long regarded physicians as guardians of public health and spiritual well-being, viewing the role of the healer as both a physical and moral responsibility. The emphasis on patient care, ethical responsibility, and the sanctity of the healing process that Hippocrates advocated can be traced back to Egyptian principles of medical ethics and spiritual healing. Following Hippocrates, the Roman physician Galen would continue to build upon Egyptian medical traditions. Galen, who was instrumental in the development of Western medical knowledge, studied anatomy, surgery, and disease through the lens of Egyptian influence. His work in anatomy, particularly his detailed understanding of the cardiovascular and nervous systems, was influenced by Egyptian texts and practices. Galen's extensive anatomical studies, many of which were conducted through the dissection of animals, drew from the groundwork laid by Egyptian healers, who had a practical understanding of the body's structure due to their mummification practices. One of the key contributions of Egyptian medicine to Greco-Roman thought was the transmission of Egyptian medical texts, particularly the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus. These texts, which were written in hieratic and later translated into Greek and Latin, contained detailed descriptions of diseases, surgical techniques, and pharmacological remedies. The Ebers Papyrus provided valuable insights into the use of herbal remedies, including treatments for ailments such as fever, digestive disorders, and infections. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, on the other hand, focused more on surgical practices and contained some of the earliest known writings on trauma, care, and diagnosis. These texts were instrumental in shaping the medical knowledge of Greek and Roman scholars, who used them as references for developing their own medical theories and practices. As Greek and Roman physicians absorbed Egyptian knowledge, they not only refined and expanded upon it, but also began to standardize medical practices. Greek and Roman schools of medicine, particularly those in Alexandria, were centers of learning that attracted scholars from all over the Mediterranean. Alexandria, in particular, was home to the famous Library of Alexandria, where Egyptian, Greek, and Roman medical texts were preserved and studied. It was in these scholarly hubs that the synthesis of Egyptian medical knowledge with Greek philosophy and Roman practicality gave rise to a more structured approach to healthcare, one that combined empirical observation with theoretical understanding. The influence of Egyptian medicine on the development of Western medical thought cannot be overstated. By the time of the Renaissance, the classical medical texts of Greece and Rome, infused with Egyptian wisdom, were rediscovered and studied by European scholars. The Renaissance period, a time of intellectual revival, saw a resurgence of interest in the anatomical and medical practices of the ancients, particularly the works of Hippocrates, Galen, and the Egyptian texts that influenced them. This rediscovery paved the way for modern medicine by reintroducing the principles of observation, diagnosis, and anatomical study that had originated in ancient Egypt. The medical practices of ancient Egypt, therefore, did not simply fade into history, but lived on through the Greek and Roman worlds, shaping the course of medical practice in the Western world. The techniques and knowledge passed from Egypt to Greece, Rome, and beyond laid the foundation for the development of modern medical systems, which, although far more advanced, are still built upon many of the principles pioneered by Egyptian healers. Having explored the deep influence of Egyptian medicine on Western medical traditions, we now turn our attention to the rediscovery of this ancient knowledge in the modern era. In the next section, we will examine how contemporary researchers and medical professionals are studying and reviving ancient Egyptian medical practices, particularly in the fields of surgery and pharmacology, and how these ancient techniques are contributing to modern medical advancements. The ancient Egyptians were pioneers in the fields of medicine, anatomy, and pharmacology, crafting a rich and complex body of knowledge that laid the foundations for future medical advancements. Yet, despite their remarkable achievements, much of their medical wisdom has been lost to time. The ravages of history, fires, wars, and the erosion of materials have erased critical texts and practices that once formed the backbone of Egyptian healing. As we delve into the mystery of what has disappeared, we uncover the tragic loss of invaluable knowledge that may have held powerful medical secrets, some of which might have been far ahead of their time. One of the most significant losses to Egyptian medical history are the vast number of medical scrolls and papyri that have vanished over the centuries. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest and most complete medical texts that survived antiquity, provides a glimpse into the advanced treatments Egyptians had for a variety of ailments, from infections to digestive disorders. However, many other crucial texts, such as those describing specific surgical techniques, treatments for psychological conditions, and divine healing rituals, have been lost. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, for example, marked a devastating blow to the preservation of ancient Egyptian knowledge. Although much of the library housed Greek and Roman works, it also contained Egyptian scrolls that were invaluable to the medical understanding of the time. Tragically, these texts disappeared, and with them, much of the ancient wisdom about healing that the Egyptians had cultivated over centuries. Aside from the loss of written knowledge, many Egyptian medical practices, herbs, and remedies have also been forgotten. The Egyptians were known for their use of powerful herbal treatments, many of which were said to treat infections, wounds, and various chronic conditions. Plants such as myrrh, frankincense, and garlic were integral to their pharmacopoeia, and the knowledge of their medicinal properties was passed down through generations. Yet, over time, the precise methods of preparation and dosages have been lost, leaving only a faint trace in later medical traditions. In the absence of detailed instructions on their use, modern researchers can only speculate about the full extent of their effectiveness. Moreover, certain treatments that blended physical healing with spiritual practices have also faded into obscurity. Ancient Egyptian medicine was deeply intertwined with the belief that illness could be caused by spiritual imbalances, and thus, spiritual healing was often integrated into their physical treatments. Rituals and incantations were used alongside herbs and surgery to treat a variety of conditions. While some of these spiritual practices were documented by later Greek and Roman physicians, the full scope of Egyptian spiritual healing practices has not survived. The Egyptians believed in the divine power of their healers, with certain medical practitioners considered intermediaries between the gods and the sick. The knowledge of these healers' rituals and techniques, which may have included chants, amulets, and specific spiritual invocations, remains a mystery. The disappearance of these ancient practices and remedies leaves us with a tantalizing sense of lost knowledge, healing techniques that may have been far more advanced than we realize. Many of the medical practices we consider cutting-edge today, such as the use of herbal antibiotics or the understanding of the mind-body connection, were understood in some form by the ancient Egyptians. However, the details of these practices remain elusive, locked away in the sands of time. Despite these losses, efforts are being made to uncover what has been forgotten. Archaeologists, historians, and modern scientists are continually working to rediscover the ancient healing methods of Egypt, and in some cases, the revival of long-lost treatments and practices is beginning to take shape. In the next section, we will explore how modern researchers are piecing together the fragments of Egypt's medical past, uncovering and reinterpreting ancient healing techniques that could one day revolutionize our understanding of medicine. The mysteries of ancient Egyptian medicine, once thought to be lost forever, are slowly being uncovered by modern science and technology. Over the last few centuries, archaeologists, historians, and medical researchers have made groundbreaking strides in recovering and understanding the medical knowledge of this ancient civilization. Much of this knowledge was preserved in texts and artifacts, some of which have been carefully safeguarded in museums or private collections. With each rediscovery, modern researchers are revealing more about the sophisticated medical practices that the Egyptians developed and refining our understanding of their contributions to contemporary medicine. A key breakthrough in the rediscovery of Egyptian medical knowledge lies in the revival of ancient medical papyri, some of which have been preserved through the ages, despite the ravages of time. Among the most significant of these texts are the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus. These texts, which date back to around 1550 BCE, provide invaluable insight into the Egyptians' approach to diagnosing and treating diseases. The Ebers Papyrus is a comprehensive medical guide, containing remedies for ailments ranging from headaches to digestive issues, as well as magical spells intended to ward off illness. It is considered one of the oldest and most complete medical texts ever discovered, offering a window into the healing methods of ancient Egypt. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, on the other hand, is a surgical treatise that contains detailed descriptions of trauma care and surgical techniques, providing early evidence of practices such as wound treatment, bone setting, and even cranial surgery. These texts are not just important historical documents, they have also sparked renewed interest in the holistic approach to health that the Egyptians practiced. In particular, their integration of physical treatment with spiritual healing offers a unique perspective on the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. Modern researchers have been particularly fascinated by how Egyptian medicine combined herbal remedies, surgical interventions, and ritualistic practices. The discovery of these texts has led to new discussions about the relevance of holistic and integrative medicine in today's healthcare systems. In addition to the rediscovery of ancient texts, modern technology is playing a crucial role in shedding light on Egypt's medical practices. Using techniques such as CT scans, X-rays, and forensic analysis, scientists have been able to gain a deeper understanding of mummification and ancient surgical interventions. For instance, CT scans of mummies have allowed researchers to examine the internal organs of ancient Egyptians, revealing insights into their medical knowledge and understanding of anatomy. These scans have helped reconstruct ancient surgical procedures, providing a glimpse into the advanced techniques used by Egyptian healers to treat fractures, tumors, and even dental issues. Forensic analysis has also been used to uncover the health conditions of individuals from ancient Egypt, allowing modern scientists to identify signs of disease and trauma. Through the study of mummies, researchers have been able to determine the presence of conditions like arthritis, heart disease, and tuberculosis, which the Egyptians were aware of and treated with their herbal remedies and surgical procedures. The use of cutting-edge imaging techniques has provided a clearer picture of how the ancient Egyptians approached diagnosis, treatment, and patient care. These advancements in technology, combined with the ongoing study of Egyptian medical papyri and artifacts, are helping to revive ancient healing practices. Researchers are working to understand how these ancient treatments, some of which are based on plants and natural remedies, could be adapted for modern use. In some cases, these practices are already being integrated into contemporary medicine, particularly in the field of alternative and complementary therapies. The rediscovery of ancient Egyptian medical knowledge not only enriches our understanding of history, but also offers the potential for new medical breakthroughs. From the study of mummification to the revival of ancient remedies, modern technology is helping us recover the secrets of a civilization that understood the intricate relationship between body, mind, and spirit long before our time. Having explored the rediscovery of ancient Egyptian medicine, we now shift focus to how this medical legacy continues to shape contemporary practices. In the next section, we will examine how modern researchers are integrating ancient Egyptian healing wisdom into current medical approaches and how these practices are influencing the ongoing evolution of global healthcare systems. In recent decades, there has been a resurgence of interest in natural remedies, herbal treatments, and a holistic approach to health approaches that closely mirror the medical practices of ancient Egypt. As modern medicine continues to evolve, there is a growing recognition of the importance of treating the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, an approach that was central to Egyptian healing. This shift toward a more integrated model of healthcare, which combines physical treatments with spiritual and emotional care, is drawing inspiration from the ancient Egyptians whose medical wisdom was rooted in balance and harmony. Ancient Egyptian medicine was built on the understanding that health was not merely the absence of disease, but a state of balance within the body, mind, and spirit. Egyptians believed that illness could be caused by disruptions in this balance, whether from physical factors, spiritual influences, or a lack of harmony with the divine. Consequently, their medical practices blended physical treatments with spiritual and magical practices, using both herbal remedies and rituals to address a wide range of conditions. Today, modern healthcare systems, particularly in alternative and integrative medicine, are beginning to embrace this same philosophy, recognizing that healing is not just about curing physical ailments, but restoring equilibrium across all aspects of an individual's health. One of the most significant ways in which ancient Egyptian practices are influencing modern healthcare is through the renewed focus on natural remedies and herbal treatments. The Egyptians were pioneers in the use of plants for medicinal purposes, and many of the herbs they used are still staples in modern pharmacology. Garlic, for example, was widely used in ancient Egypt for its medicinal properties, particularly for its antibacterial effects. Modern science has confirmed that garlic contains compounds such as allicin, which have potent antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. It is now widely used to treat conditions ranging from heart disease to infections, demonstrating a continuity of knowledge that stretches back millennia. Similarly, frankincense, which the Egyptians used for its therapeutic and spiritual properties, is now being researched for its potential benefits in managing chronic conditions like arthritis and inflammation. Studies have shown that frankincense oil can have anti-inflammatory effects and may help with pain management, echoing the Egyptians' ancient wisdom about its ability to heal the body. Aloe vera, another plant used by the Egyptians for skin ailments and digestive issues, continues to be a popular treatment in modern medicine. Its healing properties, especially in treating burns and wounds, have been confirmed by contemporary research, linking it directly to Egyptian medical traditions. These plants, among many others used by the Egyptians, are not only making their way into contemporary pharmaceutical treatments, but they are also being embraced in the growing field of alternative medicine. As more people seek natural alternatives to pharmaceuticals, the use of herbs and plant-based remedies is gaining popularity in wellness circles, paralleling the practices of ancient Egyptian healers. Furthermore, modern studies are increasingly focusing on the pharmacological potential of these plants, further validating the efficacy of Egyptian healing methods. Beyond herbal remedies, ancient Egyptian medicine also emphasized preventative care and the importance of spiritual well-being, both of which are integral to contemporary holistic health practices. In ancient Egypt, maintaining balance within the body and between the individual and the divine was seen as essential to preventing illness. Similarly, modern approaches to health are recognizing the importance of lifestyle factors such as diet, exercise, and stress management in preventing chronic diseases and promoting long-term wellness. Mindfulness, a practice that has become central to modern mental health care, echoes the Egyptian emphasis on spiritual healing. Ancient Egyptian healers used rituals, prayers, and meditation to help restore a person's spiritual balance, believing that mental and emotional states could directly impact physical health. Today, mindfulness practices, which include meditation, breathing exercises, and yoga, are increasingly incorporated into healthcare regimens to manage stress, anxiety, and chronic conditions like hypertension. This focus on mental and emotional well-being is a direct descendant of the Egyptian understanding that the mind and body are inextricably linked. Diet and nutrition, too, play a central role in both ancient Egyptian medicine and modern wellness practices. The Egyptians understood that food could be both medicine and nourishment, using specific foods and herbs to heal the body and prevent illness. They incorporated foods like honey, figs, and dates, all of which have long been known for their healing properties. Today, the growing trend toward plant-based diets, as well as the use of superfoods like turmeric, ginger, and leafy greens, reflects a modern version of this ancient philosophy. These foods are praised for their anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties, which, much like the Egyptian remedies, contribute to the overall health and vitality of the body. Modern medicine is also beginning to embrace the holistic approach that was central to Egyptian healing. In hospitals and clinics around the world, integrative medicine is gaining traction as an approach that combines conventional treatments with complementary therapies. This includes practices such as acupuncture, massage therapy, and aromatherapy therapies that, like the Egyptian methods, aim to treat not just the symptoms of illness, but the whole person. Hospitals are increasingly offering holistic care programs that address the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of health, especially for patients dealing with chronic illnesses or undergoing treatments like chemotherapy. This blending of physical medicine with complementary therapies mirrors the ancient Egyptian model, where healing was seen as a multifaceted process that involved restoring balance to all parts of the person. The return to these holistic principles has also influenced how we approach chronic diseases today. Conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and autoimmune disorders, which are often seen as the result of long-term imbalances in the body, are being treated not just with medication but with lifestyle changes that include diet, exercise, and mental health care. The integration of traditional practices with modern medicine is a growing trend that reflects the Egyptian understanding that healing is a lifelong journey that requires care for both the body and the spirit. As we look at the resurgence of these ancient Egyptian practices in the modern era, it is clear that their holistic approach to healing is influencing contemporary healthcare in profound ways. The combination of physical treatment, spiritual care, and preventive practices that the Egyptians pioneered is becoming increasingly relevant in today's medical world. From the use of herbal remedies to the focus on mental well-being, ancient Egyptian wisdom is shaping the future of health and wellness in ways that honor the past while looking toward the future. Having explored how ancient Egyptian medicine is influencing modern health practices, we now reflect on the broader legacy of Egyptian medical knowledge. In the next section, we will examine how this knowledge continues to shape our understanding of health, not only in the medical field but in broader cultural and societal contexts.